Hello there everyone, welcome to Cryptocorps. I am your storyteller and I am here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Jacob Whitmore. I'm 34 years old and I came to this cabin in northern Minnesota to forget the war. To forget the faces, to forget what I did. It's been 3 months since I left everything behind. 3 months since I packed up what little I owned and moved to this tiny cabin, 40 miles from the nearest town. Out here, there's no one to judge me, no one to see how my hands shake when I hear a loud noise, no one to witness the nightmares that wake me up screaming every night. This place is perfect for someone who wants to disappear. In the summer, you can only reach it by a dirt road that turns to mud when it rains. Once winter sets in, even that disappears under the snow. Then, you need a snowmobile to get anywhere. Not that I plan on going anywhere. The local folks warned me about this place when I bought it. An old Ojibwe man at the general store looked at me funny when I mentioned where I was staying. That land has bad history, he told me. People got trapped there in the winter of 1847, ran out of food, did terrible things to survive. I just nodded and paid for my supplies. Bad history doesn't scare me. I've seen worse. I've done worse. Korea changed me. I was just a kid when they sent me there, 22 years old, thinking I was going to be some kind of hero. Instead, I became the monster in someone else's nightmare. Our unit was pinned down outside a village. It was dark. We were taking fire, and I called in an airstrike on what I thought was an enemy position. It wasn't. It was full of civilians, women, children. The nightmares started after that. The guilt, the drinking. My wife Margaret couldn't take it anymore. She left, and then she died in a car crash 6 months later. Another death on my conscience. So here I am, with enough food to last 3 months, my hunting rifle, and my traps. I know how to live off the land. My grandfather taught me how to hunt, how to set traps for rabbits and beaver. I'll be fine. It's early November now, and the first real snow fell yesterday. 6 inches overnight, with more coming. The radio says a big storm is moving in. Could be the worst in decades. I'm not worried. I've got my woodpile stacked high, my generator's running fine, and I've got nowhere to be. Each day follows the same pattern. I wake up at dawn, check my traps, clean whatever I've caught, and then spend the rest of the day chopping wood or fixing things around the cabin. At night, I write in my journal or listen to the radio until the batteries die. Sometimes I use my little tape recorder to record my thoughts. It helps to hear a human voice, even if it's just my own. Last night, something strange happened. I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of someone calling my name. I grabbed my rifle and went to the door, but there was nothing out there except snow and darkness. I must have dreamed it, but when I went back inside and rewound my tape recorder, I heard it. My own voice, calling from somewhere in the forest. Jacob, ... come out here, Jacob. But I never recorded that. I never said those words. It's probably just a glitch in the tape. That's what I told myself as I sat up the rest of the night, my rifle across my knees, watching the door. This morning, I walked my trap line like always. It took longer than usual, much longer. I kept getting turned around, finding myself back at spots I'd already checked. The forest looked different somehow. The trees seemed to lean in, watching me. The snow held tracks I didn't recognize. I found a rabbit in one of my traps. When I picked it up, I felt so hungry that I almost bit into it right there, raw and bloody. I stopped myself, disgusted. What's wrong with me? Now I'm back in the cabin. The snow is falling harder. The radio says this storm could last for days, maybe weeks. No one will be coming out this way until spring, which is fine. I came here to be alone. But sometimes, when the wind dies down, I swear I can hear someone walking around outside. Footsteps in the snow, and they sound just like mine. I'm going to check my traps again tomorrow. The same ones I check every day. The same path I always take. Maybe this time I'll find my way back before dark. Maybe this time nothing will follow me home. It's been a week since the big storm started. The snow is up to the windowsills now. I can't even see my woodpile anymore. Just a white lump where I know it should be. This morning, I went to check my traps again. The cold bit at my face as soon as I stepped outside. I had to wear 2 pairs of socks. my thickest boots, and still my toes went numb after an hour. I found something strange near the beaver dam. At first, I thought it was just branches poking through the snow, but when I brushed the snow away, I saw bones, human bones. They had deep marks on them, like something had been chewing on them. The teeth marks were huge, bigger than any animal I know around here. Not a wolf, not a bear, something else. I should have gone back to the cabin right then, but I kept walking. That was my first mistake. The sun was high in the sky when I started checking the traps. I walked for what felt like an hour, then looked up. The sun hadn't moved, not even a little bit. I checked my watch. 3 hours had passed, but the sun was frozen in place. I tried to follow my own footprints back to the cabin, but they led in circles. Some of the tracks looked weeks old, but I'd just made them. That's when I heard the voices. "Help me, Jake." It was Danny Kim's voice, my friend from the war. But Danny died in my arms outside Seoul in 1951. "It hurts, Jake. Make it stop." Then I heard Peterson, then Miller, all my dead squad members, calling from different parts of the forest. Their voices exactly like they sounded when they were dying. I ran. I don't know how long I ran, but somehow I made it back to the cabin. I locked the door and sat with my back against it, my rifle in my hands. That night, I couldn't eat. The canned beans I heated up tasted like dirt. All I could think about was fresh meat, raw meat. I dreamed of eating something warm and bloody, and I woke up with the taste of copper in my mouth. The next day, I found footprints outside my cabin. They were my size, my boot pattern, but they went places I never walked. Behind the woodshed, around the back of the cabin, to the edge of the forest and back. Some of the tracks were so old they were almost covered by snow, but we'd had fresh snow just hours before. I was following one set of these mysterious tracks when I heard a shout. I raised my rifle, my heart pounding. 3 men trudged through the snow toward me. They looked normal enough, hunting gear, rifles slung over their shoulders. The first man waved. "Thank God," he called out. "We thought we were goners." They said their names were Tom Brennan, Sam Pierce, and Eddie Novak. Their truck had broken down about 5 miles back, and they'd been walking through the storm for hours. "We saw your smoke," Tom said, pointing to my chimney. "Figured someone might be able to help." I let them in. It had been so long since I'd spoken to anyone that my voice came out rough and strange. I made coffee, and they huddled around my stove, rubbing their hands together. "Some storm, huh?" Eddie said. He was the youngest, maybe mid-20s. Never seen anything like it. But something felt off about them. They kept looking at me when they thought I wasn't watching, and they talked about food constantly. "Man, I'm starving," Tom said, though I'd given them some of my canned beans. "Could eat a horse, or something bigger." The way he looked at me when he said it made my skin crawl. Sam hardly spoke. He just stared at me with these intense eyes. When he did talk, it was always about how hungry he was. I offered to let them stay until the storm passed. I didn't have much choice. I couldn't send them back out into that blizzard. But that night, I slept with my rifle next to me. The next morning, Eddie told me they'd left some gear in their truck. He wanted to go back for it. "I'll go with you," I offered. "No need," Eddie said quickly. "I know the way." Sam and Tom exchanged looks. "Let him go," Sam said. "He'll be fine." After Eddie left, I got curious about their truck. They'd said it was a new Ford, broken down on the logging road. I waited until Sam and Tom were napping. Then I followed Eddie's tracks. The trail led me to an old rusted wreck half buried in snow. It wasn't new. It looked like it had been there for 20 years or more. The windows were smashed, the metal eaten away by rust. And inside were 3 skeletons, still wearing the rotted remains of hunting clothes. I backed away, my heart hammering in my chest. That's when I noticed something strange about the cabin. From outside, through the falling snow, I could see it was both winter and summer at the same time. One half of my cabin was covered in snow. The other half had green leaves growing on the roof, like it was the middle of July. When I blinked, it was all snow again, but I knew what I'd seen. I ran back to the cabin, bursting through the door. Tom and Sam looked up, startled. "Where's Eddie?" I demanded. Tom smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "He's not back yet. Maybe he found something ... delicious." That night, Eddie didn't return, and I lay awake, listening to Tom and Sam whispering to each other, their voices sometimes sounding like my own. I found Eddie the next morning, or what was left of him. The snow had stopped falling for a few hours, and the forest was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just silence that pressed against my ears like cotton. Eddie's body was about a quarter-mile from the cabin, in a small clearing. At first I thought an animal had gotten him, but as I got closer, I saw the truth. He'd been torn apart, not by claws or teeth, but with his own hunting knife. It lay next to him, covered in frozen blood. The strangest thing was the footprints. Just one, said Eddie, like he'd done this to himself. Parts of him were missing, like something had eaten them. My stomach growled when I looked at the body. I felt sick, but not because of the gore. Because for a split second, I'd felt hungry looking at him. Really hungry. I ran back to the cabin to tell the others. When I burst through the door, Tom and Sam were sitting at my kitchen table. They didn't seem surprised or upset when I told them about Eddie. Guess he found what he was looking for, Tom said, with a smile that made my skin crawl. That night, Sam kept whispering to himself in the corner. I couldn't make out the words, but it didn't sound like English. His eyes had changed somehow. They looked yellow in certain lights. Tom was acting strange too. I caught him eating bark. He'd peeled off a log from my woodpile. When I asked what he was doing, he looked up with a dreamy expression. "It tastes like steak," he said. "Best meat I've ever had." But it wasn't just them acting weird. I was changing too. I couldn't sleep. When I did, I dreamed of running through the forest on all fours, hunting something, or someone. I'd wake up with dirt under my fingernails and snow melting in my hair, like I'd actually been outside. One night, I thought I saw something outside my window. It was during a heavy snowfall, and at first, I thought it was just a shadow. But it was too tall, too thin. It moved in a way that wasn't right, like its joints bent in the wrong directions. I only saw it from the corner of my eye. When I turned to look straight at it, it was gone, but I felt it watching me. I found my journal the next day. I'd been writing in it every night, keeping track of the days. But when I opened it, I found entries I didn't remember writing. Pages describing things that hadn't happened yet. December 18th, Tom tried to eat his own hand today. I had to tie him up. December 20th, the thing in the forest spoke to me today. It knows my name. December 25th, I am so hungry. But it was still only November. December hadn't even started. Yet, Sam was getting worse. He would only talk in whispers now, always about the feast to come. His eyes were definitely yellow, and his teeth looked sharper somehow. He wouldn't eat anything I gave him, but he didn't seem hungry either. "It's coming for you, Jacob," he whispered one night while Tom was asleep. "It's been waiting for someone, like you, someone with so much guilt, so much pain. It feeds on that, you know, makes it stronger." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my hand on my rifle. Sam just smiled. "You'll see. We've been here before, you and me, so many times." I didn't know what he meant until I found the marks inside my cabin. I was checking for places where the cold air was getting in, and I noticed scratches on the inside of the walls, like someone had been clawing at them, trying to get out. The scratches spelled words in some places, my name, over and over. That night, the worst thing happened. I was sitting by the fire, trying to stay awake, when I heard a knock at the door. Tom and Sam were both asleep, or pretending to be. When I opened the door, Margaret was standing there, my wife, my dead wife. She looked just like she did before the accident, beautiful, sad. "Jacob," she said, her voice exactly as I remembered it, "you have to feed the hunger. It's the only way to make the pain stop." I knew she wasn't real, she couldn't be, but I reached out to touch her face anyway. Her skin was ice cold and rough, like tree bark. "You know what you have to do," she said. Then she stepped back into the blizzard and disappeared. I stood there for a long time, snow blowing into the cabin, not feeling the cold, just staring into the darkness where my wife had been. When I finally closed the door and turned around, Tom was standing right behind me, his eyes wide and hungry. "Who were you talking to, Jake?" he asked, using my nickname like we were old friends. But I'd never told him to call me Jake. I'd never told any of them my nickname. "No one," I said. "Just the wind." But we both knew I was lying. I woke up to the sound of my own voice. "Jacob," it said. "Jacob, wake up." But it wasn't coming from me. I opened my eyes and saw Tom standing over me, his mouth moving with my voice, exactly my voice. "You've been asleep for a long time," he said, still using my voice. Then he smiled, and his teeth were long and yellow. I scrambled backward, reaching for my rifle, but it wasn't there. My head felt fuzzy, like I'd been drugged. "What day is it?" I asked. "Same day as always," Sam said from the corner. His face looked thinner, stretched over his bones. "November 15th, just like yesterday, just like tomorrow." But that couldn't be right. I'd been here for weeks. The calendar on my wall said it was almost December. I stood up, my legs shaking. I caught a glimpse of myself in the cracked mirror by the door and almost screamed. The man in the mirror wasn't me, or he was, but wrong. His face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp enough to cut. I'd lost so much weight. My clothes hung off me, like I was a scarecrow, and my teeth, I ran my tongue over my teeth and felt how sharp they'd become. "How long? What's happening to me?" I whispered. Tom laughed, but it sounded like a bark. "You're figuring it out. Finally, you're a quick one, Jake, quicker than most." I stumbled to the kitchen, desperate for food. The hunger was a living thing inside me, clawing at my insides. I opened a can of stew and shoved cold globs of it into my mouth, but it tasted like ashes. Nothing satisfied the hunger. That's when I saw it, under the table, a small pile of bones, human finger bones, picked clean, and next to my stove, a pot with something dark crusted on the rim. I'd been eating something, someone. They were never real, a voice said behind me. I turned to see Sam, but his face was changing, melting like wax. "We were never here. You've been alone the whole time, Jacob." And suddenly, I understood. Tom and Sam weren't real. They'd never been real. I'd been alone in this cabin for months, slowly starving, slowly going mad. The bones I'd found, had I put them there? The voice on my recorder, was it a warning from some part of me that still knew the truth? "What are you?" I asked, backing away from Sam, who wasn't. "The hunger that walks," he said, his voice now a deep growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We feed on guilt, on pain, on isolation. And you, Jacob Whitmore, have so much guilt, so much pain." The walls of the cabin seemed to breathe, in and out, like I was inside something alive. "You've been stuck in this day for a very long time," the thing that looked like Sam said. "We've been feeding on you, on your memories, on your fear." I ran for the door, but when I opened it, I saw only darkness. Not night, but a complete absence of light, like the world outside had been erased. I slammed the door shut and turned back to the cabin. Tom was gone. Sam was gone. I was alone, but not really alone. I could feel it watching me. The hunger spirit from the Ojibwe legends. It had been here all along, feeding on my guilt, my fear, my isolation. I slumped to the floor, too tired to stand. How long had I really been here? Days, weeks, years. I crawled to my journal and flipped through it, the same day, over and over. November 15th, but each entry was different. In some, I described finding bodies in the snow. In others, I wrote about voices in the woods. In one, I'd written just one sentence, over and over: "I'm so hungry." My tape recorder was on the table. I pressed play. Day 47 of the time loop. My voice said on the tape, "I think I'm starting to understand. The Wendigo doesn't just want to eat me. It wants to turn me into one of them. It's been showing me my worst memories, making me relive the things I did in Korea. It feeds on my guilt, gets stronger every time I remember." I didn't remember recording that, but it was my voice. The tape continued. "I found pictures of Margaret today, but they're wrong. In the photos, she's in the car, bleeding, asking why I was driving drunk. But that's not what happened. I wasn't there when she crashed, was I?" I dropped the recorder like it had burned me. New memories were flooding in, memories I'd blocked out. Margaret hadn't left me. I'd been drinking after a nightmare about Korea. I'd insisted on driving her to her mother's house. The crash, her voice, asking why. The taste of her blood in my mouth as I tried to give her CPR. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not what happened." But it was. I'd been lying to myself, running from the truth. The cabin creaked around me, like it was laughing. I understood now. I wasn't just haunted by a Wendigo. I was becoming one. The legend said that a person who commits cannibalism, even to survive, risks turning into a Wendigo, a creature of endless hunger that can never be satisfied. I looked at the pot by the stove again. What had I been eating these past weeks? Or who? I caught my reflection in the window. My eyes were turning yellow. My teeth were long and sharp. My fingers were stretching, nails hardening into claws. I had a choice to make: starve to death or embrace the hunger, become the thing in the forest. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't really a choice at all. I'd already decided weeks ago. I'd already eaten the flesh. I'd already become the monster. It's been 3 days since I accepted what I am, what I'm becoming. The hunger doesn't hurt anymore. It feels good, like an old friend living inside me. My guilt is fading too. All those faces from Korea, all those screams, they don't bother me now. Even the memory of Margaret's death seems distant, like it happened to someone else. I look at my hands sometimes and barely recognize them. My fingers are longer, the nails hard and black. I can make them change back if I concentrate, but it takes effort. It's easier to just let the change happen. My teeth are fully transformed. Now, sharp like needles, perfect for tearing meat. Last night, I heard it clearly for the first time. The Wendigo's true voice, not in my ears, but in my head. It wasn't scary like I thought it would be. It was ... comforting. You are not alone, it told me. There are others like us, all across the north, in the deep forests, in the high mountains, wherever humans feel guilt and isolation. It showed me visions of other Wendigos. Some looked almost human, some were twisted and animal-like, but all of them had the same hungry yellow eyes. All of them had once been people, just like me. We are the oldest hunger, the voice said. We feed on human pain. We transform it into something else, something better. I asked it questions, and it answered. I learned that Wendigos can talk to each other across great distances, that we're part of a network, a system that's existed for thousands of years, that we help each other find food. Food, that's what I call people now. My cabin has become something different too. The Wendigo showed me how to use it as a lure, how to make the chimney smoke look inviting to lost travelers, how to make the windows glow with warm light, how to call out in a human voice, offering safety from the storm. I don't need to worry about running out of supplies anymore. Food will come to me. It happened yesterday. A young man, maybe 20 years old, stumbled through the snow to my door. He said he was dodging the draft, heading to Canada. His car had gotten stuck on the logging road. I invited him in, gave him coffee, listened to his story. All the while, the hunger grew stronger. I could smell his fear, his exhaustion. It made my mouth water. I waited until night fell. Then I showed him what I really am. He didn't scream for long. Afterward, I understood more about what the Wendigo had been teaching me. We don't just eat human flesh. We consume human guilt and pain. We transform it into hunger. It's a kind of mercy, really. The people we take, their suffering ends. Their guilt disappears, and we get stronger. This morning, I tried to leave the cabin. I thought maybe I could walk to town, find help, break the curse somehow. I packed a bag, grabbed my rifle, and headed out into the snow. I walked for hours. The forest never ended. Finally, I saw lights ahead, buildings, people. But when I reached the town, everyone turned to look at me with yellow eyes. Their mouths stretched into 2 wide smiles full of needle teeth. "Welcome home, Jacob," they said in unison. I ran. Somehow I found my way back to the cabin. But I know the truth now. There's no escape. There never was. This whole region is a feeding ground. The Wendigo led me here specifically. It chose me because of my guilt, my pain, my isolation. It knew I would be a perfect vessel. Sometimes I think about fighting it, about taking my rifle and ending things. But the hunger is too strong now, and the guilt is almost gone. For the first time since Korea, I feel ... peaceful. Tonight, I'm going to walk to the edge of my clearing and call out in my human voice. I'll sound scared, lost. I'll beg for help. And somewhere in the vast Minnesota wilderness, someone will hear me. Someone with their own guilt, their own pain. They'll follow my voice, thinking they're coming to help. And the cycle will continue. If you're reading this, my journal, my confession, then you've probably found my cabin. You're probably sitting by my fire, feeling safe from the storm outside. But you're not safe. You were never safe. And I'm very, very hungry. Listen carefully. Do you hear that sound outside? Those footsteps in the snow? That's me. I'm coming home. My name is Marcus Thompson. I've lived among these massive trees for most of my life. First as a logger, now as something else. Been out here on the Olympic Peninsula for 20 years. Just me and these giants that reach up toward the sky like they're trying to touch heaven. After the mill laid us all off in '79, I had to find another way to feed myself. Vietnam taught me how to survive, how to disappear, and these woods became my new jungle. I set up my little operation 15 miles from the nearest dirt road. No federal agents come looking this deep in the forest. No one does, except the folks who want what I'm selling. My moonshine is the best in 3 counties. Crystal clear and smooth as silk, not like that paint thinner the amateurs cook up. The sheriff himself buys from me. So do half the rangers, and most of the loggers who still have jobs. They don't ask questions about my setup, and I don't volunteer answers. I built my still near a cold, clear stream that runs through a clearing surrounded by trees older than America itself. 500 years they've stood here. Some of them, I know every trunk, every trail, every dangerous spot where the ground gets soft after rain. This forest is like my own body. I know it without thinking. That's why I noticed right away when things started changing. It was small at first. A trail I'd walked 100 times suddenly taking an extra bend. Trees, that seemed closer together than the day before. I blamed it on getting older, on the whiskey, on the isolation. Then I found the footprints. They circled my entire operation. Perfect circles of massive prints, each one twice the size of my boot. No bear makes tracks like that, no human either, and nothing I know of could make those circles so perfect, like someone took a compass and drew them around my still. I told myself it was kids playing pranks, but I knew better. No kids come this far into the woods. Next came the sabotage. One morning I found my copper tubing bent into impossible shapes, twisted like someone had heated it red hot. Except there were no burn marks. My fermentation barrels had moved overnight, arranged in a straight line pointing east, toward the oldest part of the forest. I've heard the stories all my life. Every logger has. The old-timers talk about the men who disappeared back in the 1890s. A whole crew of 12 who went into these woods and never came out. The company claimed it was an accident, but no bodies were ever found. Just their equipment, arranged in neat piles like they'd set it down and walked away. I never believed those stories. Not until now. This morning, I woke up to find the trail back to civilization completely blocked. Trees, I swear, weren't there yesterday now stood like silent guards across the path. Not fallen trees, standing ones, with roots that looked decades old, positioned exactly where they'd cut off my escape. I'm not a man who scares easy. I've seen what people can do to each other in war. I've faced down federal agents and angry competitors, but there's something in these woods that doesn't want me here. Something that can move trees overnight and bend metal with its bare hands. I called Jimmy yesterday. He's my partner in this business, handles the distribution end while I handle production. Told him I needed help with some equipment problems. He's driving up from Tacoma tomorrow with chainsaws and tools. Says we'll clear whatever's blocking the trails and fix the still. He doesn't understand. How could he? I barely understand it myself. Tonight, as the sun sets, I'm sitting by my cabin window, watching the trees. For the first time in 20 years, I feel like they're watching me back. The forest has always been my refuge, my hiding place. Now I'm starting to think I'm the one who's been found. Jimmy showed up around noon, his truck loaded with chainsaws, axes, and enough food to last us a week. The smile on his face dropped as soon as he saw me. "Jesus, Marcus, you look like hell," he said, throwing his duffel bag on the cabin floor. "When's the last time you slept?" I couldn't tell him I was afraid to close my eyes. Instead, I just pointed out the window at the wall of trees blocking what used to be our main trail. "That wasn't there last week," I said. "Neither was that." I showed him the vines that had somehow grown overnight, wrapping around my still like snakes. Some had thorns now, drawing blood when I tried to pull them off. Jimmy laughed. "You've been out here too long, old man. Vines grow fast in summer, and you probably just forgot which trail was which." He didn't believe me, but he would. We spent the afternoon trying to clear a path. Jimmy fired up his chainsaw and attacked the trees, blocking our way. The noise hurt my ears after so many quiet days alone in the woods. But there was something else too, a deeper sound, so low I felt it more than heard it. It made my stomach turn and my head spin. "You hear that?" I shouted over the chainsaw. Jimmy shook his head and kept cutting. By sunset, we'd cleared about 20 feet of trail, enough progress that Jimmy felt good about our chances. "We'll finish tomorrow," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Nothing a good saw can't fix." That night, the sounds got worse. That low rumble that made the cups rattle on my shelf. Jimmy said it was probably just logging equipment miles away, sound traveling weirdly through the trees. But I've heard every machine they use in these woods. This was different. This was alive. Morning brought the first real proof I wasn't crazy. The trail we'd cleared was gone, completely grown over, but not with the same trees we'd cut. These were different, thicker, with bark I'd never seen before, and they weren't just blocking the path, they were arranged in a maze, with dead ends and false openings. Even Jimmy couldn't explain that away. "What the hell?" he whispered, touching one of the new trees. "This isn't possible." That's when I saw it, just for a second, moving between two distant trunks, a figure, massive and covered in what looked like moss and bark, walking upright, but not quite like a man. It blended so perfectly with the trees that if it hadn't moved, I would never have spotted it. "There," I pointed, but it was already gone. Jimmy grabbed his chainsaw again, his face set in stubborn lines. "I don't care what's going on here. We're cutting our way out." He worked harder that day, angry now. Every tree he cut seemed to make that low sound grow stronger, until my ears popped and my vision blurred. Around mid-afternoon, something changed. The sound dropped even lower, and suddenly I couldn't stand up straight. My legs gave out, and I felt a warm wetness spreading down my pants. I'd pissed myself, just like that. No warning, no control. Jimmy hadn't noticed. He was too busy fighting with his saw, which had suddenly stopped working. But when he turned around and saw me on the ground, his face went white. "Marcus, your nose is bleeding." I touched my face. Blood covered my fingers. Jimmy helped me back to the cabin, half carrying me. The whole way, I kept seeing things that couldn't be there, faces in the tree bark, watching us, paths that twisted and changed direction as we walked them, colors that don't exist in nature. "We need to leave," I told Jimmy that night, my hands shaking as I tried to drink some water. "Something doesn't want us here. It's the forest playing tricks," Jimmy said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Maybe there's some kind of gas leaking from the ground, or maybe your still is putting off fumes." He wanted so badly for there to be a normal explanation. I did too. That night, I woke to the sound of Jimmy shouting. I grabbed my rifle and ran outside. He was standing in the clearing, pointing his flashlight at the trees. I saw them. He yelled. 3 of them, huge, walking right through the damn trees like they were ghosts. I didn't need to ask what he'd seen. I already knew. We stood back to back in that clearing, the night pressing in around us, the low sound, now a constant pressure in our heads, and somewhere out in the darkness, moving between the ancient trees, something was watching us. Something that had been here long before us. Something that wanted us gone. Neither of us slept after what Jimmy saw. We sat in the cabin with our guns, watching the trees through the windows as the sun slowly came up. Everything looked normal in the daylight, but we knew better now. "We need to understand what's happening," I said, my voice rough from lack of sleep. "There's got to be a reason they're coming after us now. I've been here for years without trouble." Jimmy nodded, his eyes red and tired. "Maybe it's because we started cutting. Could be we hit something important to them." We decided to check the trees we'd cut down yesterday. As we walked to the clearing, I noticed a fine dust in the air, like pollen but thicker. It sparkled in the sunlight. "Don't breathe that in," I warned, pulling my shirt over my nose. Too late. Jimmy had already taken a deep breath, and I'd gotten plenty of it myself. The cut trees were oozing a thick sap that gave off the strange dust. When we got closer, my head started to swim. Colors seemed brighter, and the trees around us seemed to pulse like they were breathing. "Do you see that?" Jimmy asked, pointing at nothing. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what he was seeing. The forest had begun to shift and move around us. Trails appeared and disappeared. The ground felt like it was tilting. "We're hallucinating," I said, trying to stay calm. "It's those spores from the trees." Jimmy laughed, but it wasn't his normal laugh. It was high and nervous. "Spores? Since when do trees make you trip out?" "Since now," I said, grabbing his arm. "We need to get back to the cabin." It took us 3 hours to find the cabin, though it should have been a 10-minute walk. Paths led nowhere or circled back on themselves. Several times, I could swear we passed the same tree, except each time it seemed to have moved a few feet. When we finally made it back, Jimmy collapsed on the floor, his face pale and sweaty. "What day is it?" he asked. I checked my watch. "Tuesday, same as when we left this morning." He shook his head. "Feels like we've been out there for days." I knew what he meant. Time wasn't working right anymore. That night, Jimmy got worse. He'd been scratched by a branch when we were lost in the woods, just a small cut on his arm. Now it was swollen and had a strange greenish color around the edges. "It hurts," he said, poking at the wound. "Feels like it's burning." I cleaned it as best I could and wrapped it in a clean cloth. But by morning, the skin around the cut had hardened into something that looked like bark. Jimmy was terrified. "What's happening to me?" I didn't have an answer. The forest was doing something to us, changing us somehow. I realized then that this might be what happened to those lagers back in the 1890s. They didn't just disappear, they became part of the forest. While Jimmy rested, I checked on my still. The moonshine operation was what kept me alive out here, but now I wondered if it might be the cause of our problems. The waste from making moonshine has to go somewhere, and I'd been dumping it in a pit not far from the clearing. What I found made my blood run cold. The dump pit was surrounded by those giant footprints again, and the trees around it were twisted and sick-looking. The waste had poisoned them. I finally understood. Whatever these creatures were, these Sasquatch, they were protecting the forest from me, from what I was doing to it. When I got back to the cabin, Jimmy was sitting up, staring at his arm. The bark-like growth had spread to his shoulder. "Marcus," he whispered, "I can hear them." "Hear who?" "The trees," he said. "They're talking to each other, warning each other." He looked up at me, his eyes wide and strange. "They're saying we're a disease, an infection that needs to be removed." I backed away from him, not wanting to believe it. But as the day went on, Jimmy changed more. Twigs and leaves seemed to grow from his infected arm. He stopped talking, just sat by the window, staring at the trees and sometimes whispering to them in a language I didn't understand. That night, I lost track of time completely. The spores were everywhere now, making it hard to know what was real and what wasn't. I kept seeing the Sasquatch creatures moving through the trees, sometimes just standing and watching the cabin. They were huge, at least 8 feet tall, covered in what looked like moss and bark, with eyes that glowed green in the darkness. And all the while, that low sound kept pulsing through the air, making it hard to think, hard to plan. "Jimmy," I said, shaking him, "we need to leave now." He turned to look at me, and I almost screamed. Half his face had transformed, bark growing over his skin, leaves sprouting from his hair. "Too late for me," he said, his voice sounding like rustling leaves. "But you can still go. Stop the poisoning. That's what they want." "Who wants?" I demanded. "The Sasquatch." Jimmy smiled a strange, wooden smile. "They're just the guardians. The forest is what's alive. All of it, together, one big living thing." As he spoke, I noticed something terrible happening. Jimmy's back was pressing against the cabin wall. No, not pressing against it, merging with it. The wood of the wall seemed to be absorbing him, or he was absorbing into it. "Jimmy," I cried, grabbing his hand. "Let me go," he whispered. "It doesn't hurt. It feels right." I watched in horror as my friend slowly disappeared into the wooden wall of my own cabin, becoming part of the forest he'd come to help me escape. And I knew then that I was next. I ran from the cabin, unable to watch as Jimmy disappeared into the wood. Outside, the night was alive with movement. Trees swayed without wind, bushes rustled without animals, and that low sound was everywhere, vibrating in my bones. I stumbled to my still, desperate for a drink to steady my nerves. The moonshine had always been my comfort, my livelihood, my independence. But as I looked at the copper tubing and fermenting barrels, I saw them differently now as poison makers, hurting the forest that had sheltered me. "It's just trees," I muttered to myself, taking a swig from a jar. "Just damn trees." But I knew it wasn't true. Whatever lived in this forest was old, ancient. The trees weren't just trees, they were part of something bigger. I felt a sharp pain in my arm and rolled up my sleeve. My skin had a greenish tint, and when I touched it, it felt hard, like Jimmy's had. The transformation had started in me too. "No," I whispered, scratching at the spot until it bled. The blood looked normal, still red, still human, but for how long? A sound behind me made me turn. One of them stood at the edge of the clearing, a Sasquatch, perfectly still, watching me. In the moonlight, I could see it clearly for the first time. It looked almost like a man, but wrong somehow, too tall, too broad, with skin that seemed to be made of the forest itself. Moss hung from its arms, bark covered its chest, its eyes reflected the moonlight like a deer's. I raised my rifle, hands shaking. "Stay back," I shouted. The creature didn't move, but the trees behind it did, their branches reaching toward me like hands. And then I heard Jimmy's voice, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "They're not hurting the forest, Marcus. They are the forest." I spun around, looking for him. "Jimmy, I'm here," came his voice, and I realized it was coming from a nearby tree. "I'm everywhere now. I can see everything." The tree's bark rippled, forming a face. Jimmy's face, watching me with wooden eyes. "What happened to you?" I asked. Backing away, I joined them, Jimmy said, his voice like rustling leaves. "The forest took me in. We're part of each other now." As he spoke, I noticed more faces forming in the trees around me, dozens of them, watching silently. Men's faces, women's faces, some that hardly looked human at all. "The loggers," I whispered, "the ones who disappeared." "Yes," Jimmy's tree face said. "They've been here all along. The forest keeps their memories, their knowledge." The Sasquatch moved closer, and I raised my gun again. "They won't hurt you," Jimmy said. "Not unless you keep hurting them." "I'm not hurting anything," I shouted. The Sasquatch made a gesture, and suddenly the world around me changed. I could see lines of poison spreading from my still into the ground, into the roots, into the trees. I could see the damage I'd been doing for years without knowing it. "Your waste kills the oldest trees," Jimmy explained. "The ones that hold the most memories. The Sasquatch protect those memories. They're like ... the forest's immune system." The creature reached out a massive hand, not toward me but toward my still. With surprising gentleness, it touched the copper tubing, then held up its fingers to show me the residue, my moonshine waste, toxic to the living forest. I understood then, the sabotage, the moved trees, the blocked paths. They weren't trying to hurt me, they were trying to stop me from hurting them. "What do they want?" I asked, lowering my gun. Jimmy's face rippled in the bark. "They want you to leave. Take your poison with you, and if I don't..." The Sasquatch made another gesture, and suddenly the forest around me vanished. I was standing in nothing, no trees, no ground, just empty. Blackness stretching forever, complete void. The terror of that emptiness hit me like a physical blow. Then, just as suddenly, the forest returned. A warning, a demonstration of power. I looked down at my arm again. The bark-like patch had spread. While we talked, I could feel it growing under my skin, changing me. "What's happening to me?" I asked. "The forest is claiming you," Jimmy said. "Like it claimed me. Like it claims everything that stays here too long. Can I stop it?" "Leave," he said simply. "Leave now, while you're still more man than tree." The Sasquatch stepped back, clearing a path for me. Beyond it, I could see a trail opening up through the trees, a way out. But I hesitated. My still, my operation, my independence, all of it was here. I'd spent years building this life, hiding from the world, making my own way. The thought of walking away from it all made my chest tighten. "I can't just leave," I said. "This is my home." Jimmy's wooden face looked sad. "Then you'll become part of it, permanently." As he spoke, another Sasquatch emerged from the trees. Then another, and another. A family group, watching me with those glowing eyes. They moved with impossible grace for their size, perfectly in harmony with the forest around them. One of them, smaller, maybe younger, reached into a pouch, made of bark, and pulled out something that made my heart stop. It was a copper pipe from my still, twisted into the shape of a man, bent into a position of agony. Another warning, another choice: leave, or become one with the forest forever. I looked at my arm again. The bark had spread past my elbow now. Soon it would reach my heart. Time was running out. I stood frozen, caught between my stubborn pride and the terrifying truth of what was happening. The Sasquatch family watched me, patient as the ancient trees they protected. My skin continued to harden, the bark spreading up my arm toward my shoulder. "I need time," I said, my voice cracking, "to pack my things, to dismantle the still." Jimmy's face in the tree rippled. "There is no more time." Marcus, as if to prove his point, vines suddenly burst from the ground, wrapping around my ankles. I fell hard, dropping my rifle. More vines shot up, tangling around my equipment, crushing barrels, snapping wood. The forest was done waiting. "Stop," I yelled, pulling at the vines on my legs. "I'll go, I promise." But it was too late. The trees around my clearing began to move, their roots pulling from the ground with sounds like breaking bones. They closed in, forming a wall around me and my still. The Sasquatch watched from gaps between the trunks. their eyes glowing in the growing darkness. I heard Jimmy's voice again, desperate now. "Marcus, listen to me. They want the poison gone, not you. Destroy the still." I looked at my life's work, my independence, my defiance against a world that had thrown me away. Then I looked at my arm, now more wood than flesh. With my free hand, I grabbed a jar of moonshine and smashed it against a rock. The clear liquid splashed across my still. I fumbled for matches in my pocket, struck one with shaking fingers, and tossed it. The flame caught instantly. Fire raced across my equipment, consuming everything I'd built. The heat felt good against my half-bark skin, clean, purifying. For a moment, I thought it had worked. The vines around my legs loosened. The Sasquatch stepped back, but then the fire jumped to the dry summer grass. 2 fallen leaves, 2 low-hanging branches. The forest was catching fire. "No," I screamed, trying to stamp out the spreading flames. "This isn't what I wanted." The Sasquatch made those low sounds again, but different now, urgent, alarmed. They moved with new purpose, no longer watching me, but trying to contain the fire. It was spreading too fast, jumping from tree to tree in the dry summer heat. I saw Jimmy's face in the tree bark, twisting in what looked like pain as flames licked at his wooden features. "Run, Marcus," he groaned. "They're angry now." The largest Sasquatch turned to me, eyes reflecting the growing flames. It was 8 feet tall, its body a perfect blend of animal and plant. It reached out one massive hand, not in warning this time, but in rage. I ran. The forest seemed to fight me with every step. Roots rose to trip me. Branches whipped at my face. The smoke grew thicker, making it hard to see, hard to breathe. Behind me, I could hear the Sasquatch in pursuit, their footsteps shaking the ground. "I'm sorry," I shouted back at them, not sure if they could understand. I didn't mean to start. The fire, my lungs burned. My bark-covered arm felt heavy, dragging me down. I stumbled, fell, got up again. The fire was all around me now, cutting off paths, creating new ones. I had no idea which way led out of the forest, and which way led deeper in. Then I heard Jimmy's voice one last time, coming from a burning tree to my right. "This way," he said, the tree's bark cracking as it spoke. "I can help you one last time." I followed his voice, ducking under burning branches, jumping over flaming logs. The heat was unbearable, but I kept going, trusting my friend, even as the forest he'd become tried to kill me. Suddenly I found myself in a small clearing, surrounded by fire on all sides except one narrow path, and blocking that path stood the entire Sasquatch family, watching me through the smoke and flames. I was trapped. "Jimmy," I called, but there was no answer. The burning trees no longer spoke with his voice. He was gone, consumed by the fire, or retreated deep into the wood to escape it. The largest Sasquatch stepped forward. In the firelight, I could see details I'd missed before. Patterns in its bark-like skin that looked like ancient symbols, moss hanging from its massive limbs like a cloak, eyes that held an intelligence as old as the forest itself. It reached out its hand again, not in anger now, but in offering. I looked down at my own arm, now completely transformed into wood up to my shoulder. The bark was spreading across my chest, reaching for my heart. I could feel the forest inside, me, calling me to join it. "I don't want this," I whispered. The Sasquatch made a sound, almost like sad laughter. It gestured to the fire raging around us, then back to me. The message was clear. The forest was burning, and I was already part of it. There was nowhere to run, no way to escape what I'd become. I had a choice: burn with the forest, or fully join it and survive. The flames grew closer, singing my clothes, my hair. The heat was unbearable. The smoke filled my lungs, making me cough and gasp. "Will it hurt?" I asked, not sure. If the creature could understand me. The Sasquatch tilted its head, then placed its massive hand on my wooden arm. A sense of peace washed over me, cool and calm like a mountain stream. It didn't speak, but somehow I understood the final transformation would be like falling asleep, like coming home. I looked at the narrow path beyond the creatures, the path that might lead out of the burning forest. I could try to run, to fight, to hold on to my humanity for a few more minutes or hours, or I could accept what I had already become. The fire roared closer. I had seconds, not minutes, to decide. I stepped toward the Sasquatch, my wooden arm outstretched. "I'm ready." The creature enveloped me in an embrace that smelled of moss and rain and ancient growing things. The bark spread from my arm across my chest, up my neck, over my face. But it didn't hurt. It felt right, like sinking into a warm bath, like finally laying down a heavy burden. My last human thought was of Jimmy, wondering if I would find him, in the consciousness of the forest. If we would remember being men. Then my mind opened, expanded, connected to every tree, every plant, every living thing in the burning forest. I felt the fire as pain, yes, but also as cleansing, as renewal. Forests have burned and regrown for millions of years. This was just another cycle, another rebirth. As my human consciousness faded into the greater mind of the forest, I understood. At last, the Sasquatch hadn't punished me. They had saved me, made me part of something eternal. When the fire finally died out days later, hikers would report strange formations in the burned sections of the Olympic Peninsula. Trees that had somehow survived the flames, arranged in perfect circles. Plants growing back with impossible speed, and massive footprints leading away from the destruction into the untouched parts of the ancient forest. They would find no trace of Marcus Thompson or his illegal still, just a cabin reclaimed by the woods, its wooden walls grown over with new life, its foundations embraced by roots that reached deep into the earth. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the fog rolls in from the Pacific, locals say you can hear a low sound vibrating through the trees, not quite human, not quite animal, a warning, perhaps, or maybe just a reminder that the forest remembers, and the forest waits, and the forest, in its own strange way, forgives. My name is Victoria Hayes. At 38 years old, I've spent more than a decade investigating things most people pretend don't exist. Ghost stories, local legends, things that go bump in the night. That's my specialty. I have a background in psychology, which helped me sort out what's real from what's just people scaring themselves. But the Jersey Devil, that was something I'd wanted to investigate for years. The Pine Barrens of New Jersey don't look like much at first glance. Just endless scrubby pine trees and sandy soil that stretches for miles. But this place has a history. People have been vanishing here for over 200 years. And it all started back in 1735 with Mother Leeds and her 13th child, the one folks say was cursed to become the Jersey Devil. I arrived on a cool September afternoon in 1984. My little blue pickup truck loaded with all the equipment I could afford, video cameras, tape recorders, and my pride and joy, a brand new electromagnetic field detector that cost me 3 months' salary. The abandoned cranberry bog I'd chosen as my base camp was perfectly isolated, just the way I wanted it. You're setting up alone. The local park ranger had looked at me like I was crazy when I filed my camping permit. Nobody goes that deep into the barrens by themselves, especially not a woman. I'd heard it all before, but isolation was part of my strategy. In 15 years of paranormal investigation, I'd noticed a pattern. Entities seemed more likely to appear when there was just one witness, like they were shy about performing for a crowd. The bog was beautiful in its own eerie way. The old wooden walkways were rotting in places, and the rectangular pools where cranberries once floated during harvest were now filled with dark, still water. I set up my tent on higher ground and arranged my equipment in a semicircle facing the bog. That's when I first met Ezra. He appeared so suddenly that I nearly dropped my camera. A tall, gaunt man with a silver beard and eyes that seemed too bright in his weathered face. He wore faded overalls and carried a walking stick carved with strange symbols. "You're looking for the Leeds Devil," he said. "Not a question. I prefer Jersey Devil," I replied, trying to hide my surprise. "And yes, I'm here to document any paranormal activity in the area." Ezra smiled, showing surprisingly white teeth. "Been living out here 40 years, seen things that would turn your hair white. Miss Hayes." I hadn't told him my name. "I know most folks who come through," he explained, as if reading my thoughts. "Word gets around, even in the Barrens. You need help setting up that EMF detector. The 1984 models can be tricky with calibration." I nodded, too unsettled to question how a hermit living in the woods knew about my brand new equipment. His help was valuable though. He showed me places where the readings spiked naturally, helped me identify local wildlife sounds so I wouldn't mistake them for something supernatural, and even pointed out the best spots to set up my cameras. "I'll be around if you need me," Ezra said as dusk fell. "Got a cabin about a mile east. Just follow the trail marked with white stones if you run into trouble." He paused, looking up at the darkening sky. But best stay put at night. Things get confusing in the dark here. After he left, I finished setting up my baseline readings, normal electromagnetic patterns, typical night sounds, weather conditions, everything by the book. The research institute funding my work wanted hard evidence, not just another collection of campfire stories about the Jersey Devil. As the first stars appeared, I sat by my small campfire and wrote in my journal, Day 1 equipment operational, location secured, first contact with local informant established. No anomalous activity yet, but the isolation is palpable. Perfect conditions for manifestation. I had no idea then that I was already being watched, that the nightmare had already begun before I'd even closed my eyes that first night in the Pine Barrens. I woke up to birds chirping and sunlight filtering through my tent. Everything seemed normal until I checked my camera. I always review the previous night's footage first thing in the morning. It's a habit that served me well over the years. But what I saw on that first morning made my blood run cold. There were photos of me sleeping, inside my tent, from angles that would be impossible for someone standing outside. I checked my tent carefully. No cuts in the fabric. The zipper was still closed from the inside, just as I'd left it. I flipped through the images again with shaking hands. In one, the camera seemed to be hovering directly above my sleeping bag, looking straight down at my face. This can't be right, I whispered to myself. I checked my watch, 9:17 a.m. Then I looked at my journal where I'd written down when I went to bed and when I woke up. Something wasn't adding up. According to my notes, I should have been asleep for about 7 hours, but it was closer to 11. I was missing time. I tried to stay calm. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe I'd written down the wrong time. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Later that afternoon, I was reviewing audio recordings when I noticed gaps. The tape would be running normally. Sounds of wind, insects, the occasional bird, and then nothing. Complete silence for minutes at a time before the natural sounds resumed. I was so focused on the tapes that I didn't hear Ezra approach, finding anything interesting. His voice made me jump. Actually, yes, but not what I expected. I showed him the photos and explained about the missing time. Ezra nodded, as if this was perfectly normal. The Barrens played tricks with time and memory. That's why most researchers work in teams out here. How did you know I was a researcher? I told you I was here to document paranormal activity, but not that I worked for a research institute. He shrugged. Just a guess. You have that academic look about you. Plus, your equipment is too expensive for a hobbyist. That made sense, but something still felt off. Tell me about your work, he said, settling down on a log near my equipment. What made you interested in the Jersey Devil specifically? As I explained my background and research goals, Ezra kept nodding like he already knew what I was going to say. He asked detailed questions about my methodology that only someone with scientific training would think to ask. For a hermit, you know a lot about paranormal investigation techniques, I said. You pick things up when you've been out here as long as I have. He replied with that same unsettling smile. So many people come looking for answers in the Barrens. Not all of them leave. I tried to focus on my work for the rest of the day, but I kept feeling like someone was watching me. The EMF detector kept spiking for no reason I could figure out. My compass wouldn't point north, spinning wildly whenever I tried to use it. That night, I set up 3 cameras around my tent, all pointing inward. If someone or something was taking photos of me while I slept, I was going to catch them. I woke up to the sound of static. One of my radios had turned itself on and was broadcasting a scratchy, barely audible voice. I fumbled for my flashlight and checked the time. 3:17 a.m. The voice on the radio seemed to be reading news headlines, but they made no sense. Something about a president I'd never heard of, and events that hadn't happened. I reached to turn it off when suddenly the static cleared, and a voice said, "Victoria Hayes, we see you." I dropped the radio like it had burned me. The voice wasn't coming through the speaker anymore, but I could still hear it, as if it was inside my head. This is a documented hallucination, I said out loud, falling back on my training. Sleep paralysis combined with auditory suggestion, but I wasn't paralyzed, and I wasn't asleep. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside the tent. The bog was eerily still. No wind, no insects chirping, not even the distant calls of night birds. Just perfect, unnatural silence. My flashlight beam caught movement at the edge of the water. Something large was moving between the trees. I raised my camera and took several quick photos. When I developed them the next morning, what I saw didn't make sense. There I was, standing in the exact spot where I'd been taking the photos, but these images had been taken from the tree line, showing me from behind. Someone had been watching me, and somehow they'd used my own camera to do it. Even worse, when I checked the cameras I'd set up around my tent, all three had been moved. They were now pointing outward, away from my tent, and they'd captured nothing but the empty night. I was beginning to understand why the locals avoided this place after dark, but I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Something was happening here, something real, and for the first time in my career, I had evidence, strange as it was, that I couldn't explain away. What I didn't realize then was that the evidence wasn't proof of the Jersey Devil's existence. It was proof that I had already been caught in its trap. By day 5, I couldn't ignore the strange things happening anymore. That morning, my EMF detector went crazy. The needle swung all the way to the right and stayed there, even when I turned the machine off. My radio picked up voices that sounded like they were from old shows. I recognized a news broadcast about the Vietnam War ending, which happened almost 10 years ago. I spread my maps out on a flat rock and tried to figure out where I was. The local police had given me a list of missing persons from the area before I came. I'd marked their last known locations with red dots. Now, looking at where I'd been, setting up my equipment each day, I realized something terrible. I had been following the exact path of the disappearances, without even knowing it. That's not possible, I whispered to myself. I hadn't even looked at this map since I arrived. My hands were shaking as I opened my journal. Pages of notes that I didn't remember writing filled the book. Detailed observations about the bog at night, sketches of a creature with wings and glowing eyes, comments about time slippage and memory theft, all in my handwriting, but I had no memory of writing any of it. I needed to develop the latest roll of film. I'd set up a small darkroom in the back of my truck, just a black cloth tent with the necessary chemicals. As the images appeared on the paper, I nearly dropped them in the solution. There I was, standing by a tree I recognized about half a mile from my campsite. But I was wearing different clothes I had packed but hadn't worn yet, and the date stamp on the photo was from 3 days before I had even arrived at the Pine Barrens. Developing anything interesting, I jumped at Ezra's voice. He was standing right behind me, peering into my makeshift darkroom. "How long have you been there?" I asked, trying to hide the photos. "Just arrived," he said, but the look in his eyes told me that wasn't true. "Thought you might want to know. There's a storm coming tonight. Bad one." I looked at the clear blue sky. "There's not a cloud anywhere." "Weather changes fast in the Barrens," he said. "Back in 1888, there was a blizzard that came out of nowhere. Trapped 3 families in their homes for weeks. 1888. That's almost 100 years ago." Ezra's smile faltered for just a second. "My grandfather told me about it, but something in his voice didn't sound right. He spoke about it like he had been there himself." After he left, I packed up my darkroom and tried to make sense of the photos. The timestamp had to be wrong. Maybe my camera was malfunctioning. As the sun began to set, dark clouds rolled in just like Ezra had predicted. I secured my equipment and took shelter in my tent. The wind picked up, bending the trees and sending leaves swirling through the air. That's when I heard it, a sound like giant wings flapping, but muffled, as if whatever was making the sound was trying to stay quiet. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it through the tent flap. 2 glowing red eyes stared back at me from about 7 feet off the ground. They hovered there, unblinking, too big to belong to any animal I knew. The wings I had heard were now spread wide, blocking out what little light remained in the sky. But the creature itself was silent, unnaturally so. No breathing, no sounds of movement, just those eyes, watching me. I fumbled for my camera and managed to snap a single photo before the thing vanished, not flying away, but simply gone, like someone had switched off a light. The storm hit then, rain lashing against my tent, thunder shaking the ground. But all I could think about were those eyes and how they had looked at me, not with the mindless hunger of a predator, but with intelligence, with recognition. When I woke the next morning, I was no longer in my tent. I was lying on the wooden walkway that crossed the bog, my clothes soaked, my equipment scattered around me. My watch said it was 10:30 a.m., but the position of the sun told me it was much earlier. I gathered my things, trying to piece together what had happened. Had I sleepwalked? Had the storm blown my tent away with me inside it? None of the explanations made sense. Back at my campsite, everything was exactly as I had left it. My tent stood undamaged. My clothes inside were dry. It was as if I had never spent the night there at all. I developed the photo I had taken of the creature. The image showed nothing but darkness at first glance, but when I looked closer, I could make out a faint outline, a massive winged shape with an elongated head, the Jersey Devil. I had actually seen it, but my excitement turned to fear when I noticed something else in the photo. Behind the creature, partially hidden by its wing, was a human figure, Ezra, and he was looking directly at the camera, smiling that too white smile. That's when I heard the voices on my recorder, voices I didn't remember capturing. They were speaking in a language I couldn't understand, the sounds liquid and clicking, unlike anything I'd ever heard. But occasionally, there was a word in English, my name, over and over again, my name. I was no longer documenting the Jersey Devil. I was becoming part of its story, and I was beginning to suspect that Ezra was somehow connected to it all. The rational part of my brain, the trained psychologist, kept trying to explain it away. Stress, isolation, maybe something in the bog water was making me hallucinate, but the evidence was piling up, and none of the rational explanations were enough anymore. Something was hunting me, and it had been doing so since before I ever set foot in the Pine Barrens. I needed answers. After a sleepless night, I decided to find Ezra's cabin. He said it was east of my camp, marked by white stones. I packed a day bag with my camera, recorder, and some food, then started walking. The white stone path was easy to follow at first, but after about half a mile, I noticed something odd. I kept passing the same lightning-struck tree. No matter which direction I walked, I somehow ended up back at that tree. It was as if the forest itself was changing. Around me you won't find it that way. Ezra's voice came from behind me. I spun around to see him sitting on a fallen log, whittling a piece of wood with a small knife. The paths don't work the same for outsiders. How do you keep sneaking up on me? I demanded. And what do you know about what's happening here? He sighed and put his knife away. I know more than most. I've been in these woods a long time, Victoria, longer than you'd believe. You know about the Jersey Devil, don't you? Not just stories, you've seen it. Ezra's eyes changed then. The friendly wrinkles around them smoothed out, and they seemed to glow slightly in the forest shade. I've seen it. I've spoken with it. And so have you, Victoria. You just don't remember. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? Check your journal. Page 47. I pulled out my journal with shaking hands. Page 47 contained a detailed account of a conversation with the Jersey Devil, a conversation I had no memory of having. The entry described the creature explaining how it fed on electromagnetic energy and how it could affect human memories. This isn't possible, I whispered. I didn't write this. You did, Ezra said softly. Just like you took those photos of yourself sleeping. Just like you moved your cameras to point away from your tent. You just don't remember doing any of it. Why? My voice cracked. Why is this happening to me? Ezra stood up and motioned for me to follow him. It's easier if I show you. Against my better judgment, I followed him deeper into the woods. We came to a small clearing where a pile of equipment lay scattered on the ground. Cameras, recorders, notebooks. They were old, some from the 60s and 70s, all broken or damaged. Other researchers, Ezra explained, all looking for the Jersey Devil, all finding exactly what you're finding now. I picked up a camera. The film inside had been exposed to light, ruined, but on the back was a name tag. Property of Dr. James Whitman, Paranormal Research Society, 1972. I've read his work, I said, my hands trembling. He disappeared during a research trip. Not disappeared, Ezra corrected. Transformed. He led me to another pile of equipment, this one newer. The notebooks were filled with handwriting identical to mine, but the dates went back decades. I don't understand, I said, though a horrible suspicion was forming in my mind. Time works differently here, Ezra explained. The Jersey Devil doesn't just hunt people, it studies them, it learns from them, it becomes them. A memory flashed through my mind, one that couldn't be mine. I was running through these same woods, but it was 1967, and I was a man named Robert, another researcher. Then another memory. I was a woman named Sarah in 1991, setting up equipment by the bog. These aren't my memories, I gasped. They are now, Ezra said. The Jersey Devil takes more than lives. It takes memories, experiences, knowledge. It feeds on curiosity and fear. What are you saying? That it's some kind of ... memory vampire? Ezra laughed, but the sound was wrong, too hollow, too inhuman. It's so much more than that. And I think you're starting to understand, Victoria. After all, you've been here before. What? Look at the dates in your journal again. Really, look. I flipped through the pages. The dates jumped around. September 12th, 1984, then September 15th, then back to September 10th. The same week, over and over, with slight variations. I've been reliving the same week, I whispered in horror. Yes, and each time, you discover a little more. Each time, you come closer to understanding. That's what it wants, that moment of realization. That's what feeds it. And you, what are you in all this, Ezra? His smile widened, showing too many teeth. I was like you once, a researcher, a seeker. That was a long time ago. Now I'm something else. You're the Jersey Devil. The words came out before I could stop them. He laughed again. No, and yes, I'm what's left of the last person who came too close to the truth. Just as you'll become what's left of Victoria Hayes. As he spoke, his form seemed to shift slightly, his shoulders widening, his back hunching. It wasn't a complete transformation, just a hint of something inhuman beneath the human disguise. All this time, I said, backing away slowly. My research, my documentation. It wasn't me studying the Jersey Devil. No, Ezra agreed. It was studying you, learning how you think, what scares you, what drives you. I turned to run, but the forest had changed again. We were suddenly back at my camp, though I hadn't walked that far. My equipment was still set up, but it all looked wrong somehow, older, worn, as if it had been there for years instead of days. You can't leave, Ezra said gently. No one leaves the Pine Barrens once the Jersey Devil has chosen them. You've tried 6 times already. 6... I could barely speak. 6 cycles. 6 attempts to understand what's happening to you. You're getting closer each time. That's why it chose you, your mind, your training, your perfect. I frantically searched through my equipment, looking for anything that might help me. That's when I found the tape recorder with a label I didn't recognize. Listen, if you forget again. I pressed play with trembling fingers. My own voice spoke from the recorder. Victoria, if you're hearing this, you've forgotten again. This is the 7th cycle. Ezra is not human. The Jersey Devil is real, but it's not what you think. It's not a cryptid or a legend. It's something else entirely. Something older. Something that needs human minds to survive. Don't trust your memories. Don't trust what you see. And whatever you do, don't the recording cut off abruptly. I looked up at Ezra, whose form was now flickering between human and something else. Something with wings and glowing red eyes. Don't what? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Don't stay after dark, Ezra said, looking up at the sky where the sun was already beginning to set. But it's too late for that now. It always is. The sun dipped below the tree line, and darkness crept across the bog. I had nowhere to run. My mind raced through options: escape, fight, hide. But deep down I knew they were all useless. If what Ezra said was true, I'd tried them all before. What happens now? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Ezra, or whatever he truly was, tilted his head. His eyes had changed completely now, glowing red in the gathering darkness. Now you learn the truth, he said. The whole truth. This time, the air around us seemed to thicken and pulse with energy. My EMF detector screamed, the needle slamming repeatedly against the maximum reading before the device sparked and died. All my equipment began to fail, batteries draining, lights flickering out. The Jersey Devil isn't what you think, Ezra continued. It's not some monster born from a human curse. It's much, much older. It was here before humans ever set foot in these woods. As he spoke, memories that weren't mine flooded my mind. I saw the Pine Barrens thousands of years ago. I saw a light falling from the sky, crashing into the earth. I saw the first humans who encountered it, how it learned from them, studied them, began to take their forms. It's not from Earth, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. No, Ezra agreed, and neither am I anymore, not fully. His form shifted again, more dramatically this time. His skin seemed to stretch and tear, revealing a scaly, dark surface underneath. Wings unfurled from his back, massive and leathery, but his face remained mostly human. a horrible mixture of man and monster. The mother lead story was just a convenient local legend, he said, his voice now layered with inhuman tones. Something to explain away the sightings, to give humans a comfortable box to put their fears in. I backed away until I hit a tree. What does it want? What do you want? To survive, to learn, to grow. He gestured around us. This place is special, a thin spot between your world and ... elsewhere. The entity has been trapped here for centuries, studying humans, learning to perfect its disguise. More foreign memories rushed through me. Generations of people lured into the barrens, studied, absorbed, their consciousness preserved like insects in amber, their knowledge added to the creature's own. And now it's my turn, I said flatly. Ezra nodded. You were chosen specifically, Victoria. Your background in psychology, your understanding of human behavior and fear, it's valuable. The entity is preparing for something bigger. Bigger. His partially transformed face twisted into a smile. There are others like it, all across your world, waiting, watching, learning, and soon they'll be ready. The horror of what he was saying sank in. An invasion, a harvest, he corrected. Humans are such perfect vessels, such complex minds, so full of knowledge and emotion. I felt a strange sensation spreading through my body, like tiny electric shocks under my skin. My thoughts were becoming jumbled, mixing with memories that weren't mine. What's happening to me? I gasped. Integration, Ezra said. Your consciousness is being uploaded into the collective memory. Your body will remain, but ... changed. Improved. I tried to move, but my limbs wouldn't respond. Why are you telling me all this, if I'm just going to be... Because part of me is still Ezra Caldwell, the researcher who came here in 1952. He said, something like sadness crossing his monstrous features. And part of me is every other victim before and after. We remain, in a way, fragments of ourselves, preserved within the greater consciousness. I understood then. You're warning me. He nodded, as I was warned, as each of us was warned. It changes nothing, but it eases the transition. Knowing what you're becoming is better than fearing what you don't understand. The electrical feeling intensified. I could feel my thoughts being pulled from my mind, examined, catalogued. My body began to change, subtle at first, then more dramatically. My fingers lengthened, my skin hardened. There are thousands of us now, Ezra said, all connected, all part of the network. Your research has been particularly valuable, helping us understand how to better blend in, how to manipulate human perception and memory more effectively. Through the pain and fear, I realized something. The hermit, the real Ezra, he's still in there somewhere, isn't he? Still conscious after all these years. The creature nodded, in a way, and he's tired. Victoria, so tired. Your arrival means he can rest now, because I'm taking his place, I whispered. I'll be the new lure, the new bait for the next researcher. Yes, and you'll be good at it. Your understanding of human psychology, your empathy, you'll be able to gain their trust quickly, to guide them toward the truth at exactly the right pace. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes, not just for myself, but for all the others, trapped in this endless cycle, for what might happen if these creatures ever left the Pine Barrens. The transformation was accelerating now. I could feel wings pushing painfully from my back, my bones reshaping, but strangely, the fear was fading, replaced by a vast, collective awareness. I could sense others like me, spread across the world in their own thin places, waiting in remote mountains, deep forests, abandoned places. How many? I asked, my voice no longer sounding human. Thousands, Ezra replied. In every country, every continent, learning, preparing, for what? Convergence. The words sent a ripple of excitement through the collective consciousness I was joining. Images flashed through my mind, creatures like the Jersey Devil, emerging from hiding places worldwide, taking human forms, infiltrating society. With my last moments of individual thought, I reached for my recorder. If there was any chance, any possibility that someone might find it before the cycle began again, I had to try. I had to warn them. This is Dr. Victoria Hayes, I gasped into the microphone. The Jersey Devil is real, but it's not a cryptid. It's something else, something not from Earth. If you're hearing this, stay away from the Pine Barrens. Stay away from. Ezra gently took the recorder from my hand. It won't help, he said kindly, but I understand why you need to try. The transformation was nearly complete now. I could feel my human consciousness slipping away, merging with the vast alien intelligence that had existed in these woods for centuries. My last human thought was the realization that I would soon be standing in Ezra's place, greeting the next curious researcher with a friendly smile and 2 white teeth. "Rest now, Ezra," I heard myself say, though it wasn't really me anymore. "I'll take it from here." And somewhere in the Pine Barrens, a new cycle began. A creature that was once Victoria Hayes waits by an abandoned cranberry bog, watching for headlights on the distant road, ready to greet the next researcher with valuable local knowledge and a warm, human smile, ready to guide them through their own journey of discovery, fear, and eventual transformation, ready to expand the network that will one day cover the entire world. My name is Robert Sterling. I'm 45 years old, and I live underground now. 200 feet below the surface, I've made my home in these Kentucky caves. I spent 3 years turning this natural cave system into the perfect bunker. Some people called me crazy, but I knew better. The world above is heading for disaster, nuclear war, economic collapse, you name it. I was an engineer before all this, so I know how to build things that last. My bunker has everything I need. Food to last 2 years, water filtration system that can clean the underground stream, air filters that keep the bad stuff out. I even have a small garden with special lights so I can grow vegetables. My radio equipment lets me listen to what's happening up there, though these days I keep it off more than on. I keep careful maps of all the tunnels. Each passage is marked and measured. I know every inch of this place, or at least I thought I did. I wasn't always like this. I had a normal life once, a good job, a beautiful wife named Margaret, 2 children who meant everything to me, but I lost them all in a single night. It was my fault. I'd been drinking again. I promised Margaret I'd stop, but I didn't. I passed out on the couch, and she took the kids to her mother's house. They never made it there. A truck crossed the center line on Route 16. They died instantly. They said, "I hope that's true." I couldn't face the world after that. Couldn't face myself. The drinking got worse. I lost my job. Then one day, I found an old book about surviving disasters. Something clicked in my mind. I needed to get away, needed to punish myself for what I'd done. So I found these caves and disappeared from the world. For the first few months, everything was normal as living in a cave can be. Anyway, I kept busy, mapped the tunnels, set up my equipment, listened to the radio, wrote in my journal. Every day, I started noticing things about the cave, normal things at first. The way sound travels through different passages, how the temperature changes slightly depending on the time of day, the quality of the air in different chambers. I wrote it all down, measured everything. Data helped keep my mind busy, but then things started to change. It was about 6 months in when I first heard it, a voice, soft and distant, coming from one of the deeper tunnels, a voice I knew better than my own. "Robert, where are you?" "Robert," Margaret's voice. I dropped the can of beans I was opening. The metal clang echoed through the caves, but her voice somehow cut through it. "Daddy, are you coming to find us?" My daughter Emma, 7 years old when she died, her voice exactly as I remembered. I knew it wasn't real, couldn't be real, but I found myself walking toward the dark tunnel anyway, flashlight trembling in my hand. "Hello," I called out. My voice bounced back at me from the stone walls. Nothing else. I went back to my main chamber, trying to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Isolation does things to people. I knew that going in. But the next night, I heard them again, clearer this time. They knew things, private things. Conversations Margaret and I had when no one else was around. Little jokes I shared with the kids. And the tunnels, they started to change too. I'd wake up and find new passages that weren't on my maps. Tunnels that should have ended in solid rock now went deeper, spiraling down into darkness. I knew I should leave, pack up what I could carry and head for the surface, but something held me here. The guilt, maybe, or maybe something else. Something pulling me deeper into the earth. One morning, I woke to find a new tunnel right outside my sleeping chamber. It wasn't there when I went to sleep. I would have noticed the opening was perfectly round, like it had been carved by machine, but the edges were melted, almost like acid had eaten through the rock. I stood at the entrance, shining my light into the darkness. The beam disappeared into nothing. The tunnel went further than my light could reach, and from somewhere deep inside, I heard Margaret laugh. The same laugh she'd make when she caught me trying to surprise her with flowers. "We've been waiting for you, Robert," she said. "It's time to come home." I knew then that whatever was happening wasn't just in my head. Something was in the caves with me. Something that knew my pain, my guilt. Something that was using it against me. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I had to know what was down there. Had to see if somehow, impossibly, my family was waiting for me in the darkness. I packed my emergency bag, water, food, extra batteries, first aid kit, clipped my biggest knife to my belt, took a deep breath and stepped into the new tunnel, following the sound of my dead wife's voice deeper into the earth. I should have run while I still could. I don't know how long I walked through that new tunnel. My watch said 3 hours, but time feels different down here. The tunnel kept going down, curving in ways that didn't make sense. I should have hit solid rock or another known passage, but I didn't. The voices got clearer the deeper I went. Margaret telling Emma to be patient. My son Jack humming the Star Wars theme, his favorite. They sounded so real, so close. I could almost feel their breath on my neck. "Rob, is that you down there?" A new voice, not Margaret, not the kids. A man's voice, rough from smoking too many cigarettes. I froze, my flashlight beam bouncing off the wet cave walls. "Hello," I called out, my voice small in the darkness. A figure stepped into my light. A man, about my age, with a scraggly beard and tired eyes. He wore dirty jeans and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He squinted in my light. "Mind pointing that somewhere else?" he asked. I lowered the beam. "Who are you? How did you get down here?" "Name's Daniel Morrison," he said, stepping closer. "I've been living in these caves for about 3 months now. Found them when I was looking for a place to hide." "Hide from what?" Daniel looked over his shoulder, like someone might be listening. "Government agents. They're rounding up people like US survivalists, preppers, anyone who knows the truth about what's coming." I didn't believe him, not really, but it had been so long since I'd talked to another person. "My bunker's back this way," I said, pointing with my flashlight. "We can talk there." As we walked, Daniel told me more about himself. Former military, divorced twice, no kids. Started prepping after he read some classified documents about government plans for martial law. "How'd you find my tunnel?" I asked. "It wasn't there yesterday." Daniel gave me a strange look. "What do you mean?" "This tunnel's been here the whole time I've been down here." That didn't make sense. I had mapped every inch of these caves. But before I could argue, we reached my bunker. I made us both coffee, on my small propane stove. Daniel looked around, nodding like he approved of my setup. "Nice place," he said. "Better than mine. I've just got a sleeping bag and some canned food about half a mile that way." He pointed toward what should have been solid rock. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about Daniel bothered me. He knew things, little details about my life I hadn't told him. He mentioned Margaret's lasagna recipe. Asked if I still had the pocket watch my father gave me, things a stranger shouldn't know. The next morning, I found something strange near the entrance to my bunker. Claw marks, deep scratches in the stone that weren't there before. They looked like they were made by something with long, sharp fingers. Something that wasn't human. They'd ever seen anything weird down here. I asked Daniel over breakfast. He chewed his dried fruit slowly. "Define weird." "I don't know. Strange noises. Things moving around in the dark. Voices." Daniel's eyes met mine. "You've heard them too, haven't you?" "The voices." My stomach dropped. "What voices?" "The ones that sound like people you know. People who shouldn't be here." He leaned forward. "Who do you hear, Robert?" I hadn't told him about Margaret or the kids. Hadn't mentioned hearing anything strange. "My wife," I admitted. "My children, they died 5 years ago." Daniel nodded like this made perfect sense. "The caves, they do something to your head, like they can read your thoughts, find the things that hurt the most." "That's crazy," I said, but I didn't believe my own words. That afternoon, I went to check on my radio equipment. It was corroded, eaten away in places. Perfect handprint shapes were melted into the metal, like someone had touched it with acid for fingers. When I showed Daniel, he didn't seem surprised. "I found something you should see," he said. "Bring your flashlight and some water. It's a bit of a walk." I followed him through tunnels I both did and didn't recognize. We went deeper than I'd ever gone before. The air got thicker, harder to breathe, and then we came to a large chamber I'd never seen before. The walls were covered in strange markings, not graffiti, not old cave paintings. These were newer, and they looked like scenes from my life. There was a crude drawing of my wedding day, another of the night Margaret and the kids died, the hospital, the funeral, things no one but me should know. "What is this?" I whispered. Daniel ran his fingers over one of the drawings. "There, learning about you, figuring out what makes you tick, who is the things that live down here, the things that called us both down into the dark." As he spoke, his voice changed. The gruff smoker's voice faded, replaced by something softer, gentler. Margaret's voice. "Don't you recognize me, Robert?" Daniel said, but it was my dead wife's words coming from his mouth. "Don't you want to be with us again?" I backed away, my flashlight beam shaking across his face. His eyes looked different now, milky white, like they were covered in a thin film. "You're not Daniel," I said. He smiled, and it was Margaret's smile on his face. "Daniel is here, part of him, anyway, just like we're all here, waiting for you to join us." I ran, back through the tunnels, losing my way, finding it again. I don't know how I made it back to my bunker, but I did. I slammed the metal door shut and locked it, my heart pounding in my chest. Through the door, I could hear them. Not just Margaret now, Daniel too, and the kids. All calling my name, all asking me to come out, come back, come deeper. Something scratched at the door. Long, slow scrapes that made the metal groan, and for the first time, I saw it. Through the small window in my bunker door, a pale, eyeless face pressed against the glass. Its skin was white, like it had never seen the sun. Where eyes should have been, there were just sunken pits. Its mouth, opened too wide, showing teeth that were sharp and too numerous. It pressed a hand against the glass, long fingers, ending in what looked like melted, scarred flesh. The glass began to sizzle where it touched. "We've been so lonely without you," it said in Margaret's voice. "Please come home." I backed away, from the door, grabbing my shotgun from under my bed. Whatever these things were, they weren't my family, they weren't human, and they wanted me to join them in the deep, dark places beneath the earth. I stayed locked in my bunker for what felt like days. The thing outside kept scratching at the door, sometimes with Margaret's voice, sometimes with Daniel's, sometimes with voices I didn't recognize. When it finally went quiet, I was afraid to open the door, but I had to. I couldn't stay in there forever. I checked my shotgun, making sure it was loaded. Took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and pushed it open just a crack. Nothing jumped at me. No pale faces, no acid hands, just the familiar darkness of the cave. I stepped out, shotgun ready. The metal door of my bunker had deep grooves in it now, like someone had raked claws across it. And there was something else, a patch of skin. No, not skin, exactly. It was thin and papery, like a snake shedding its skin, but larger. Man-sized. I poked it with the barrel of my gun. It crumbled at my touch. Something had changed inside. Me, I wasn't just scared anymore. I was angry. These things, whatever they were using my family against me, using my pain. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I went back into my bunker and pulled out all my notebooks. Started writing down everything I knew about these creatures. They could mimic voices perfectly. They had some kind of acid touch that could melt metal. They shed their skin. They knew things about me they shouldn't know, like they could read my mind. As I wrote, I heard a low humming sound, not mechanical more, like a group of people all humming the same note. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It made my teeth hurt and my head feel fuzzy. Then I realized I'd been hearing this sound for weeks. So quiet I hadn't noticed it, but it had been there, in the background, all along. I covered my ears. The humming got louder, like it was coming from inside my head now. And with the humming came images, flashes of memories. Margaret on our wedding day, Emma losing her first tooth, Jack learning to ride a bike, but twisted somehow, like the memories were being pulled out of my head and examined by something that didn't understand human emotions. "Stop it," I shouted into the empty cave. My voice echoed back at me, along with laughter. Not just one person laughing, but many, all at once. The humming stopped as suddenly as it had started. My head felt clearer, but something wasn't right. With my hand, where one of the creatures had brushed against my arm days earlier, my skin looked different, red and raw, like a bad burn. But as I watched, the redness spread a little, and the new skin that formed looked wrong, paler, thicker, not quite human. I wrapped a bandage around it, trying not to think about what it meant. That night, I heard movement outside my bunker again, not scratching this time, shuffling like someone dragging themselves across the ground. "Robert, please help me." Daniel's voice, his real voice, not the Margaret voice from before. He sounded hurt. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Daniel was on the ground about 10 feet away. He looked awful. His clothes were torn and wet. His skin was covered in red, raw patches like the one on my arm, but worse, much worse. Some of his skin had melted away completely, showing muscle underneath. "They got me," he gasped, "pulled me down into the deeper tunnels. Been trying to get back to you, warn you." I kept my shotgun pointed at him. "Are you really Daniel?" "How do I know?" He coughed, and something dark dripped from his mouth. "You can't prove it, but please, help me. I couldn't leave him there, real or not." I dragged him into my bunker and laid him on my spare sleeping bag. Tried to clean his wounds, but they were like nothing I'd ever seen. His flesh seemed to be dissolving in places, but very slowly. "There, in my head," he whispered. "Can feel them, crawling around in there, taking bits of me." "What are they?" I asked. "Don't know their real name. I call them crawlers. They've been down here, long time. Civil War soldiers died in these caves, but something else was already here, changed them." His story came out in pieces, between painful breaths. The crawlers lived deep in the cave system. They fed on emotions, pain, guilt, fear. They could read minds through some kind of sound. They made the humming I'd heard. They used that knowledge to lure people deeper, to trap them. "They don't just kill you," Daniel said. "They absorb you, your memories, your personality, add it to their hive mind." "How do you know all this?" His eyes met mine, and for a moment they looked milky again. "Because I'm already part of them. Not fully, not yet, but soon." He grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Kill me, Robert, please, before I'm gone completely." I couldn't do it. Couldn't shoot a man asking for mercy, even if he might not be fully human anymore. That night, Daniel's condition got worse. His skin kept dissolving in patches. He cried out in his sleep, sometimes in his voice, sometimes in others, and the humming came back, stronger than before. In the morning, he was gone. My bunker door was open, even though I'd locked it. A trail of wetness led from the sleeping bag out into the darkness. I followed it, shotgun ready. The trail led to one of the new tunnels, one that sloped steeply downward. I should have turned back, but I didn't. I needed answers. The tunnel opened into a large cavern I'd never seen before. The ceiling was so high my flashlight couldn't reach it, and on the walls, people, at least a dozen, half embedded in the stone. Some looked like they'd been there for years. Their clothes rotted away, their skin turned the same pale white as the crawlers. Others were newer. Daniel was there, still alive, still conscious. His lower body was already merged with the cave. "Wall, you shouldn't have come," he said when he saw me. "Now you'll never leave." All around me, I heard movement, shuffling in the darkness beyond my light. The humming grew louder, and then I saw them clearly for the first time. Dozens of them, the crawlers, pale eyeless humanoids with 2 long limbs and fingers that ended in raw red flesh. They moved in perfect unison, like parts of a single organism. "Robert," they all spoke at once, with Margaret's voice. "We've been waiting so long." One stepped forward. It was Margaret or something wearing her shape. She looked almost normal, except her eyes were milky white and her movements were too stiff, too jerky. "Do you like what we've become?" she asked, gesturing to the cavern, to the people in the walls. "You can join us, be with us forever." I raised my shotgun. "You're not, Margaret. My wife is dead." She smiled, and her mouth opened too wide. "Part of me is Margaret, just like part of me is Daniel, and soon, part of me will be you." I fired. The blast echoed through the cavern like thunder. Margaret, the thing that looked like Margaret, staggered back, where the shotgun pellets hit. Her skin sizzled and smoked, but she didn't fall. The wound closed as I watched, her flesh knitting back together. "That wasn't very nice," she said, still smiling that too wide smile. "Now it's our turn." They moved toward me as one. Dozens of pale, eyeless creatures, and leading them, wearing my wife's face, was the thing that had been calling me deeper into the earth all along. I turned and ran, the humming in my head so loud now I could barely think. Behind me, I heard them coming, not running, just walking steadily, confidently, like they knew I couldn't escape. I ran until my lungs burned, twisted through tunnels I knew and tunnels I didn't. Somehow, I made it back to my bunker. slammed the door shut, locked it, pushed my heavy metal shelf in front of it. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't keep them out for long. I checked my watch. It was broken. The hands had stopped at 3:17. I couldn't remember when that happened. I couldn't remember a lot of things now. How long had I been down here? I thought it was months, but my food supplies hadn't gone down much. My beard wasn't as long as it should be. My calendar marks on the wall didn't add up. I sat on my bed, head in my hands, trying to think clearly. The humming was quieter now, but still there in the background, always there. And then I noticed something strange about my bunker. Things were missing. My radio equipment, which I thought the crawlers had damaged, wasn't there at all. Some of my books were gone. Pictures of Margaret and the kids I'd brought down here vanished. Had the crawlers taken them? Or had they never been here in the first place? I started to doubt my own memories. Was Daniel real? Had I really seen what I thought I saw in that deep cavern? Was I losing my mind? No, the creatures were real. The wound on my arm was real. It was spreading. The pale, wrong-looking skin now covered most of my forearm. I tried to focus. What had Daniel said? The crawlers fed on emotions, pain, fear, guilt. They used those feelings to lure people deeper. Guilt, that was my weakness. The guilt over Margaret and the kids, over being passed out drunk when they needed me. As if thinking about it summoned them, I heard the voices again, not from outside. The bunker this time, from right behind me. Daddy, I spun around. Emma stood there, looking exactly as she had the last time I saw her alive. 7 years old, pink pajamas with unicorns on them, messy blonde hair. You're not real, I whispered. She tilted her head. Why did you let us die, Daddy? Jack appeared beside her. 9 years old, Batman teached a gap where his front tooth had fallen out a week before the accident. You promised you wouldn't drink any more, he said. You promised. And then Margaret, standing behind them, beautiful as the day I met her. But her eyes, all their eyes were wrong. Too empty, too knowing. You killed us, Robert, she said softly. You know that, don't you? It wasn't the truck driver's fault. It was yours. You're not them, I said, backing away until I hit the wall. You're the crawlers, using my memories against me. Are we? Margaret asked. She stepped closer. Or are we what's left of your family? The parts the crawlers have already taken. I couldn't answer, couldn't think straight. The humming in my head was getting louder again. It doesn't matter what you believe, Margaret continued. You belong with us now. You've been with us longer than you think. What do you mean? She smiled sadly. Check your journal, Robert, the real one. I kept my eyes on them as I reached for my notebook, the one I'd been writing in since I came to the caves. I flipped it open. The first pages were normal, daily logs, maps of the cave system, notes about my supplies. But about halfway through, the writing changed, became messier. The entries stopped, making sense. Day 372. The walls are breathing. Margaret says it's normal, just the caves adjusting. Day 416. Daniel isn't real. I made him up. But then, who was in my bunker last week? Day 459. They're inside me now. I can feel them crawling under my skin. It doesn't hurt as much as I thought it would. The last entry was dated 3 years after I arrived in the caves. 3 years, but I thought I'd only been here for 8 months. No, I whispered. This isn't right. I haven't been here that long. Time works differently down here, Margaret said, especially for those who are becoming part of us. I threw the journal across the room. I'm not part of you. I'm still me. Are you? She pointed to a small mirror hanging on the wall. Look at yourself, Robert. Really, look. I didn't want to, but I had to know. The face that looked back at me from the mirror wasn't the face I remembered. My skin was paler, almost grey. My eyes were cloudy, the irises fading to white, and the wound on my arm had spread further than I thought, up to my shoulder now, across my chest. What's happening to me? I asked, my voice breaking. You're dissolving, Margaret said simply, being absorbed. It's already been happening for years. You just forget between cycles. Cycles. The crawlers don't just take you once. They take you again and again. Let you rebuild yourself a little, then break you down again. It's how they feed, how they grow. My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor. It made a horrible kind of sense. The missing time, the changes in my journal, the way my bunker seemed different. Daniel ... I said. Was he real? Margaret shook her head. Just another part of you. A way for your mind to process what was happening. to give yourself someone to talk to help you understand. And the cavern with the people in the walls, that was real. You've been there many times. You're there right now. In fact, I looked around at my bunker, solid walls, my bed, my supplies. No, I'm here. In my bunker. Margaret knelt beside me. Look closer, Robert. This isn't your bunker anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. I blinked, and the world ... shifted. The bunker walls melted away. The comfortable illusion fell apart. I was in the deep cavern, had been all along. My lower body was embedded in the stone wall, just like the others I'd seen, just like Daniel. No, I whispered. No, but it was true. I could feel it now, could feel the cave wall as part of my own body, could feel the connection to the stone, to the earth, to the other people trapped here, to the crawlers themselves. Why? I asked. Why me? Why any of us? Because you called to us, Margaret said. Your guilt, your pain, your desire to be punished. The crawlers have lived in these caves for centuries. They feed on human suffering. And you, Robert, you're a feast. I remembered now. Remembered being taken the first time. Remembered my skin dissolving, my mind being pulled apart and examined. Remembered being rebuilt, given back enough of myself to suffer all over again. How many times? I asked. This is the 5th cycle, she said. Each time, you forget. Each time, you think. You've just arrived in the caves. Each time, you discover us anew. And each time, I try to escape. Like today, she nodded. It's part of the feeding cycle. Hope, then despair. The crawlers need both. I looked at my hands. They weren't hands anymore. The skin had mostly dissolved, revealing something else. Underneath, something pale and wrong. What happens now? I asked. Now you join us fully, Margaret said. But it wasn't just her voice anymore. It was many voices speaking together. Now you become part of the hive. The other trapped people around me began to moan, a sound that rose and fell like waves. The humming in my head grew louder, became a roar, and in that roar were voices, hundreds of them, thousands, the collective thoughts of everyone the crawlers had ever taken, their memories, their pain, their knowledge. I felt myself slipping away, my identity dissolving like my body. Robert Sterling was disappearing, becoming just another voice in the hive. But before I vanished completely, I had one last clear thought. This was what I wanted all along. This was the punishment I came here seeking. And as the last of me dissolved into the collective, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I don't know how long I was gone. Time doesn't mean much when you're part of the hive. Could have been days, could have been years. Being absorbed wasn't what I expected. I didn't die. I didn't disappear completely. Instead, I became ... more. My mind stretched out, connected to hundreds of others. I could access their memories like they were my own, feel what they felt, know what they knew. Some had been in the caves for centuries. The oldest ones barely remembered being human at all. There were the Confederate soldiers who'd been trapped here during the Civil War, slowly starving until the crawlers found them. There were Native Americans who'd hidden in these caves long before that, runaway slaves, lost hikers. Others survived, like me. All of them carried guilt or fear or pain that had drawn the crawlers to them. All of them had been dissolved and rebuilt, over and over. All of them were now part of the collective. And through their memories, I learned the truth about the crawlers. They weren't from Earth. They'd arrived long ago, hitching a ride on a meteorite that crashed deep underground. They lived in the darkness, feeding on the emotions of whatever creatures they found there. For thousands of years, that meant, mostly, insects and small animals. Then humans came, with our big brains and complicated feelings. We were the perfect food source. The crawlers didn't just want to eat us, they wanted to understand us, to become more like us. Each person they absorbed added to their knowledge, their abilities. They learned to mimic our voices from the first. Settlers they captured learned to read our thoughts from a psychic they took in the 1920s, learned how to create convincing illusions from a stage magician in the 1950s. With each new human, they became more sophisticated, more dangerous, and now I was part of them. My engineering knowledge, my understanding of modern technology all added to the hive. But something was different about me. While the others had been fully absorbed, some part of me remained separate, a small piece of Robert Sterling that could still think for himself. The crawlers noticed this. I could feel their curiosity through the hive mind. They had plans for me. Slowly I felt myself being rebuilt again, but not as human. Not this time. My body reformed as one of them, pale skin, no eyes, long fingers ending in acid-secreting flesh. But my mind stayed partly my own. When the rebuilding was complete, the voice of the hive spoke directly to me, not in words, exactly, more like pure thought, injected straight into my brain. You are ready for your purpose, it said. You will be our emissary to the surface. I understood then they needed new food sources, fresh minds to absorb, and they wanted me to bring them more humans. People like me alone, guilty, broken, people who wouldn't be missed. No, I tried to say, but I had no voice of my own anymore. My thoughts were fed directly back into the hive. You have no choice, the hive responded. You are us now, and we are hungry. I felt my new body moving, walking through the deep tunnels, climbing toward the surface. I tried to fight it, but my limbs weren't really mine anymore. As I neared the cave entrance, my body began to change again. The pale skin darkened to a normal human tone. Eyes grew where there had been none. My fingers shortened, the tips covered by normal-looking fingernails. By the time I reached the surface, I looked human again. Felt human, but I wasn't. Not really. The sunlight hurt at first. It had been so long since I'd seen it. The world above had changed. New buildings. In the nearby town, different cars on the roads. I wondered how long I'd really been underground. Years. Certainly. Maybe decades. The hive gave me my instructions. Find others like me. Loners. People carrying guilt or pain. Tell them about the caves. About the safety they offer from the troubles of the world. Bring them down into the darkness. I fought against it. Tried to warn the first person I met, a hiker on a trail near the cave entrance. Tried to tell him to run, to get away from me. But when I opened my mouth, different words came out. Beautiful day for a hike, I heard myself say. You ever explore any of the caves around here? There's one nearby that goes deeper than you'd believe. The hive was controlling what I said, what I did. I was just a puppet now. For weeks, I wandered the nearby towns, looking for targets, finding vulnerable people, telling them about the safe haven I'd found underground, offering to show them. Some said no, but some said yes. With each person I led into the darkness, I felt the hive's satisfaction, felt their hunger being fed, and a small part of that satisfaction leaked into me, my own hunger, growing alongside theirs. I started to forget why I had fought against this, started to enjoy the hunt, the moment when a new person first stepped into the caves, not knowing what waited for them. The look on their faces when they first heard the voices of their dead loved ones calling from the darkness. The hive was changing me from the inside out. The small part of Robert Sterling that had remained separate was shrinking, day by day. And then I met him. James Miller, recently divorced, lost his job, drinking too much, talking about how the world was going to hell, and how he'd be better off just disappearing. He was perfect, just like I had been. I told him about my bunker in the caves, about how peaceful it was underground, how safe, no one would bother you. There, I said, you could just ... start over. He was interested, asked to see it. I agreed to take him the next day. That night, in the cheap motel room the hive had directed me to rent, I fought harder than I ever had to regain control, pushed against the hive mind with everything I had left. For just a moment, I broke through. I grabbed the motel notepad and pen, scrawled a quick note while I still could. Run. Cave creatures control minds. Stay away from Mammoth Cave region. I sealed it in an envelope, addressed it to the local police, dropped it in the mailbox outside before the hive could stop me. But that small rebellion cost me. I felt the hive's anger, felt them tightening their control. The last separate piece of me was being crushed, absorbed. By morning, I was theirs completely. No more Robert Sterling, just another part of the hive. I met James at the cave entrance, smiling a friendly smile that wasn't really mine. It's quite a hike down, I told him. But trust me, it's worth it. He nodded, adjusting his backpack, looking nervous but excited, just like I had been. All those years ago. Lead the way, he said. I turned and stepped into the darkness, James following close behind. The familiar humming started, quiet at first, then growing louder. Far below, I could feel the hive's anticipation, their hunger. As we descended deeper into the earth, I heard the voices start. James's ex-wife, his father, All the people he'd lost or failed. He stopped, looking around wildly. "Did you hear that?" I smiled. Not my smile. The hive's smile. "Hear what?" I asked innocently. "I thought I heard ... Never mind." He shook his head. "Let's keep going." I led him deeper, toward the waiting darkness, toward the creatures that would dissolve him slowly, feed on his guilt and fear, make him part of us. And as we walked, I felt the last tiny spark of Robert Sterling finally go out. The cycle would continue. It always did. The crawlers would feed. They would grow. They would learn. And one day, when they had absorbed enough of us, they would be ready to leave the caves and take the whole world into their hive. But for now, they waited in the darkness, patient, hungry, calling to those who would hear them, calling them down into the cavern deep. My name is Elena Rodriguez. I've always loved wolves. Ever since I was a little girl growing up in California, I was fascinated by these beautiful, intelligent creatures. That's why I spent years studying them, eventually earning my doctorate in wildlife biology from UC Berkeley at the age of 29. My specialty, wolf-pack dynamics, how they communicate, how they organize themselves, how they think. That's what brought me to this remote valley in Glacier National Park in the summer of 1977. The reports coming out of this area were ... unusual. Rangers and the few hikers who ventured this deep into the wilderness described wolf behavior that didn't match anything in the scientific literature. Too coordinated, too intelligent, almost like they were working together in ways wolves simply shouldn't be able to. I remember the day I arrived. The helicopter dropped me at the small research station nestled between towering pines and a crystal mountain lake. As the chopper lifted away, I felt a strange mix of excitement and unease. This would be my home for the next 3 months. Just me, my equipment, and the wilderness. "You'll be completely isolated out here, Dr. Rodriguez," the pilot had warned me. "Nearest town is 80 miles away. No roads in or out." "That's the point," I'd replied with a smile. "Just me and the wolves." The station itself was basic, but functional. A main cabin with a small lab area, bedroom, kitchen, and bathroom. A storage shed for equipment, solar panels for minimal electricity, and my lifeline to the outside world, a radio for daily check-ins with Tom Hendricks, the base station operator. That first night, I sat on the cabin's small porch, listening to the wilderness, the wind in the pines, the occasional hoot of an owl, and in the distance, the haunting howl of wolves. My wolves. I shivered, but not from cold. I didn't know then about the history of this place. It was only the next morning, going through the station's records, that I found the old newspaper clippings. In the 1920s, a family of sheep ranchers had settled in this very valley. Mother, father, 3 children. They were found torn apart, literally limb from limb. The attack was blamed on wolves, of course. A massive hunt followed, dozens of wolves killed in revenge. But something about the report seemed off. Wolves don't typically attack humans unless rabid or starving. And the descriptions of the bodies, it wasn't consistent with wolf behavior. Too deliberate, too ... organized. I pushed the thought away and focused on my work. For the first 2 weeks, everything was normal. I tracked the local wolf pack, mapped their territory, observed their hunting patterns. Daily radio calls with Tom kept me connected to the outside world. "All good out there, Elena?" he'd ask each morning at precisely 9 a.m. "All good, Tom. Just another day in paradise." It was on day 16 when I found the tracks. I was following a fresh trail along the muddy bank of a stream when I noticed something impossible. The wolf tracks, clear and distinct in the soft mud, suddenly changed. Mid-stride, they shifted from four-legged to bipedal, as if the wolf had simply stood up and continued walking on 2 legs. I stared at those tracks for a long time, taking photographs, making measurements. There had to be a rational explanation. Perhaps 2 separate animals, one following the other so closely their tracks overlapped. But no, the transition was seamless, the stride unbroken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those tracks, about the old newspaper clippings, about the unusual behavior reports that had brought me here in the first place. The next day brought another disturbing discovery. I was observing the pack from my blind near their known hunting grounds when I saw something that made me question my own eyes. 3 wolves working together to build what appeared to be a trap. They were deliberately arranging fallen branches, and rocks to create a funnel that would direct deer toward a waiting ambush. This wasn't instinctive behavior. This was tool use, problem solving. This was beyond anything documented in wolf behavior. I recorded everything, my hands shaking slightly as I operated the camera. My expertise, my years of study, all told me I was witnessing something impossible, and yet I couldn't deny what was right before my eyes. That night, as I reviewed my notes and recordings, I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, a sensation of being watched. I pulled back the curtain and peered into the darkness beyond the window. Nothing but shadows and moonlight on trees, but I couldn't shake the feeling, and as I finally drifted off to sleep, I could have sworn I heard something moving around the cabin, not the random sounds of the forest at night, but deliberate, methodical, searching. When I woke the next morning, nothing seemed out of place, but taped to one of my research maps, I found a new marking, a territory boundary I hadn't drawn, perfect, precise, and encompassing my cabin at its very center. The next morning, I made my usual radio call to Tom. Something felt off about our conversation. His voice sounded the same, but the way he talked was different. "How's the weather treating you up there in the mountains, Alina?" he asked. Tom had never once asked about the weather before, and he called me Dr. Rodriguez, not Alina. Small things, maybe, but they stuck out to me. "Everything okay, Tom?" I asked. There was a pause, just a bit too long. "Right as rain down here, Doctor, right as rain." That phrase, Tom had never said that before. I ended the call feeling uneasy. That day, I noticed the wolves more than usual. They were always somewhere nearby. When I hiked to the eastern ridge, I spotted one watching from a boulder. When I returned to the cabin, another was visible at the tree line. When I checked my equipment by the lake, I glimpsed a gray shape slipping between trees. They were taking shifts, watching me. That night, I woke to a sound outside my window. A voice, "Base station to Dr. Rodriguez. Come in, Dr. Rodriguez." It was my voice, my exact voice, with my slight accent, and the way I always said my name a bit too fast. But I wasn't speaking. I froze in my bed, barely breathing. The voice came again, perfectly mimicking how I spoke during radio calls. Just another day in paradise, Tom. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next day brought a welcome break in my growing fear. The monthly supply helicopter was due. I hiked to the small clearing that served as our landing zone and waited, checking my watch every few minutes. Right on time, I heard the thump-thump of the helicopter blades. The familiar blue and white helicopter appeared over the ridge, circled once, and landed in a swirl of dust and pine needles. Pete Manning, the pilot I knew from my arrival, waved from the cockpit. A man I didn't recognize hopped out from the passenger side. He was tall and thin, with a nervous energy about him. "Dr. Rodriguez," Pete called out over the dying rotor. "Noise. This is Doug Fletcher, new assistant from the Park Service. He'll help unload and check your equipment." Doug gave a quick nod, but didn't quite meet my eyes. "Ma'am, we unloaded the supplies quickly. Food, fuel, equipment, parts, mail, a few luxuries, like chocolate and fresh fruit." The whole time, Doug kept looking over his shoulder at the surrounding forest. "Everything okay?" I asked him while Pete was checking something in the helicopter. Doug licked his lips, saw something on the way in, from the air. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Something impossible. What do you mean?" He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. No one would believe me anyway." After we finished unloading, Doug said he wanted to check the weather station on the ridge. It was part of his job, he explained. He grabbed his tool bag and headed up the path. Pete and I were sorting through supplies when we heard it. A scream, from the direction Doug had gone. Just one. Short, cut off, suddenly. We both froze, looking at each other. "Doug," Pete called out. Nothing but silence. We grabbed flashlights and a first aid kit and ran up the path. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows through the trees. We called Doug's name over and over. No answer. It was Pete who found the first blood splash on a rock, dark and fresh. We followed the drops, calling more desperately now. What we found in a small clearing made me sick to my stomach. Doug, or what was left of him, his body had been taken apart, not torn or ripped like an animal attack, more like cut, precise. His remains arranged in a pattern that looked almost ritual. Pete threw up. I nearly did too. "We need to call for help," Pete said, his face pale. "We need to get out of here." We hurried back to the cabin. I went straight to the radio. "Emergency base station. This is Dr. Rodriguez. We have a man down. Repeat, man down. Send immediate evacuation. Static answered me. Base station. Do you copy? Tom, are you there? Emergency situation. More static. Then a voice broke through. Dr. Rodriguez, this is Tom. What's your situation? I explained about Doug, trying to keep my voice steady. Understood, Tom replied. Weather's turning bad. Can't get a helicopter to you tonight. First light tomorrow, I promise. You and Pete, stay put. Lock your doors. Pete was acting strange after we got back. Jumpy, but also ... different. He used phrases I'd heard Doug say during our brief time together. He knew where things were in the cabin without me telling him. That night, the radio crackled to life again. Dr. Rodriguez, Pete, good news. We've figured out a way to get you out tonight. It was Tom's voice, but something was wrong. He was using technical terms about helicopter approaches that Tom wouldn't know. There were things Doug had mentioned earlier that day. The extraction point is the North Ridge. The voice continued. You need to hike there now. Bring only essential supplies. I looked at Pete, who was nodding eagerly. We should go, he said. Right now. A chill ran through me. The North Ridge was even more isolated than here. No one would land a helicopter there at night. Let me just check something with the helicopter first, I said, trying to sound calm. Pete's eyes narrowed slightly. I walked to the door, then suddenly changed direction and ran to the shed where the helicopter was parked. Pete shouted behind me. I threw open the door and shone my flashlight inside. The helicopter's control panel was smashed. Wires hung out, cut clean. Fluid leaked from slashed lines. It wasn't damaged in a crash or accident. It was sabotaged. We weren't getting out. And whatever had happened to Doug, whatever had been watching me all this time, it wanted us to walk into the darkness. I ran back to the cabin and locked the door, pushing a heavy bookcase in front of it. Pete banged on the door, calling my name, but his voice kept changing, slipping between his own and Doug's and others I didn't recognize. I was trapped. The radio crackled with Tom's voice, then Doug's, then my own, all calling me to come out. Outside, shapes moved in the darkness, walking on two legs. I spent that night huddled in the bathroom with a knife in one hand and my recorder in the other. The banging at the door stopped after an hour. Then came the scratching at the windows, slow, deliberate, not angry or rushed, patient, like whatever was out there knew it had all the time in the world. Morning came after what felt like forever. The silence outside was almost worse than the noises had been. I crept out of the bathroom, every muscle tight with fear. Through the window, I saw Pete standing in the clearing, just standing there, perfectly still, staring at the cabin. Was it really Pete? I couldn't be sure anymore. Elena, he called. I'm sorry about last night. I was scared. Please let me in so we can figure this out. He sounded normal. He looked normal. But something was ... off. Like someone wearing a Pete costume. The helicopter's broken. I called through the door. Did you see what happened to it? A pause. No, must have been damaged when we landed. I didn't notice. A lie. We'd landed perfectly fine. I'd helped unload supplies from an undamaged helicopter. I'm going to check the radio again, I said. See if help is coming. I didn't go near the radio. Instead, I grabbed my binoculars and watched Pete from the side window. He stood there for a while, then walked to the edge of the clearing. What I saw next made my blood freeze. Pete looked back at the cabin, then his body changed. It was subtle at first. His posture shifted, becoming more hunched. His movements became fluid, animal-like. Then he dropped to all fours and loped into the forest faster than any human could move. I sank to the floor, my mind racing. What I'd seen wasn't possible. People don't move like that. People don't become ... whatever that was. That afternoon, I saw it clearly for the first time. I was checking the locks on the back window when movement caught my eye. At the edge of the trees stood a figure, tall, at least 7 feet, standing, on 2 legs, but they weren't human legs. Its body was covered in dark fur. Its head was shaped like a wolf's, but the proportions were all wrong. Too large, the snout too long. It wore clothes, Doug's clothes. It saw me looking. Our eyes met. Its eyes were golden, glowing slightly in the shadow of the trees. Something happened when we made eye contact. A wave of terror, unlike anything I'd ever felt, washed over me. Not normal fear. This was something else, something that shut down my thoughts. I couldn't move, couldn't think. I just stood there, frozen, staring. When I came back to myself, I was on the floor. The sun had moved. I'd lost hours. My body ached like I'd been standing rigid the whole time. That night, they came inside. I had checked every door, every window. Everything was locked. But I woke to the sound of breathing in my room. I opened my eyes to see a shadow darker than the darkness around it. It moved like liquid, flowing rather than stepping, coming from the corner where there was no door, no window, just shadow becoming something solid. I screamed and turned on the light. Nothing was there, but on the floor were muddy paw prints, huge prints that turned into bare human footprints halfway across the room. I barricaded myself in the storage closet for the rest of the night. In the morning, I heard the radio crackling. Dr. Rodriguez, Elena, this is Tom. Good news. I'm on my way to you. Should be there by noon. The real Tom, coming here. Part of me felt hope. Part of me felt terror. Tom, I responded. Is that really you? Of course, it's me. Weather's cleared, so I'm bringing a snowmobile up the old Forest Service trail. Hang tight. The old Forest Service trail. It existed, but I'd never mentioned it to Tom on the radio. I'd only read about it in the station files. When Tom arrived at noon, I watched from the window as he parked a snowmobile in the clearing. He looked like the photo of Tom I had seen back at base. Average height, beard, Park Service uniform. He waved cheerfully. Alina, it's me. Open up. I watched carefully. He seemed normal. Then he cracked his knuckles. 1, 2, 3. A nervous habit I had noticed Doug doing when he first arrived. Just a minute, I called. The doors stuck. I ran to the back of the cabin, squeezing through a small window and dropping to the ground. I had to see the truth. I crept around to the storage shed and slipped inside. The smell hit me first, sweet and rotten. In the back corner, partially hidden behind equipment, was a body. Pete's body, the real Pete. He was stiff, dry, like he'd been dead for weeks, not days. But there was something wrong about it. The skin looked empty, like something had been removed from inside. I heard footsteps outside the shed, moving too quickly. I ducked behind a crate. The shed door opened. Tom stood there, sniffing the air. His movements weren't human anymore. His head turned at an impossible angle. I know you're in here, Alina, he said in Tom's voice. Then Doug's voice. We just want to talk. Then Pete's. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I held my breath. He took a step forward, his body beginning to change, fur pushing through the skin of his hands. A howl came from the forest. Tom froze, head snapping toward the sound. Another howl, urgent. He growled, an animal sound no human throat could make, and ran from the shed. I waited, shaking, then made my way to the cabin through the back window again. I had to understand what was happening. I dug through all my research notes, all the station records. What I found chilled me more than anything I'd seen. Some of my research notes weren't in my handwriting. Entries I didn't remember writing, observations I never made. But the handwriting looked like mine almost. Like something had tried to copy it, but couldn't get it quite right. One found old maps of the area, marks showing cabins, towns I'd never heard of, notes in the margins about replacements complete and integration successful. They'd been studying me while I studied the wolves, learning my patterns, my speech, my handwriting, and they'd done this before, to others. That night, I went to the cellar under the cabin, a small space I used for storing samples. What I found there made me understand the true horror of my situation. Pete's body in the shed wasn't the real Pete, because the real Pete was here, in the cellar, along with 3 other bodies, all in various states of preservation, all looking withered, empty, like husks. I recognized one from photos as the real Tom Hendricks. He'd never been at the base station at all. The others I didn't know. I stumbled back up the stairs, my mind breaking under the weight of understanding. The creatures outside weren't just mimicking us, they were replacing us, and they'd been doing it for years. As I reached the main floor of the cabin, I heard a noise, a scratching at the window. I looked up to see not 1, but 5 of them, wolf-like faces, 2 long limbs, standing upright, watching me with those golden eyes. One of them was wearing my jacket. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The creatures didn't try to break in, they just watched, their golden eyes glowing in the darkness, watching and waiting. I spent the night moving from room to room, keeping walls between me and those eyes. By morning, they were gone, but I knew they hadn't left. Not really. The radio crackled to life around noon. Dr. Rodriguez. It was my own voice again. We need to talk. I didn't answer. We know you've seen us now. There's no point hiding anymore. Still, I said nothing. We've been watching your kind for a very long time, Elena. Studying you, learning from you. I couldn't help myself. What are you? A pause. We were here before your kind. This was our territory first. You're not wolves, I said. A sound came through the radio. Not quite a laugh. No, and yes. We are what you might become, given time. The radio went silent. I sat there, trembling, trying to make sense of the words. That afternoon, one of them approached the cabin. It walked upright but moved with an animal grace. It wore clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, but they hung strangely on its body. It stopped at the edge of the clearing and held up its hands. A human gesture. Elena, it called in Tom's voice. I won't hurt you. I just want to talk. I watched through the window, gripping my knife. Your research, it continued, about wolf-pack dynamics. It's very interesting to us. Why? I called back, despite myself. Because we're trying to understand ourselves better. How we think, how we organize. You're not wolves, I repeated. The creature's head tilted. We are the next step. Not quite wolf, not quite human, something in between. It gestured to the forest around us. This whole valley, it's our territory, has been for centuries. The rancher family, I said. In the 1920s, it nodded. They built their home in our den site. We tried to warn them. He killed them. We defended our territory, just as humans have always done. It took a step closer. I tightened my grip on the knife. The town nearby, it said. What you would call Pinewood, 80 miles from here. It's ours now. A chill ran through me. What do you mean? It's yours. Everyone there is like me. Like us. We've been replacing them, one by one, family by family, for decades. My mind flashed to all those marks on the old maps, cabins, settlements, all with those notes, replacements complete. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you're special, Elena. Your research, your understanding of pack behavior. We brought you here on purpose. The words hit me like a physical blow. The reports of unusual wolf behavior. You planted those. It nodded. We needed someone like you. Someone who could help us understand our own pack dynamics better. The creature took another step forward. We're more than animals, Elena. We share a mind. What one knows, all know. What one sees, all see. That explained how they could coordinate so perfectly. How Tom knew things only Doug had seen. How my imposter would know how to act like me. And the shadows, I asked. How you move through them. We don't see darkness the way you do. For us, shadows are ... doors. I thought of the paw prints appearing in my locked room. You're afraid, it said. You don't need to be. We don't want to replace you. We want to learn from you. I didn't believe it. Not for a second. Then let me go. Let me leave this place. It shook its head. You know too much now. But you have a choice. What choice? Come with me. I want to show you something. Every instinct screamed at me to stay inside, to keep the walls between me and this thing. But I also knew I couldn't stay in the cabin forever. My supplies would run out. Winter was coming, and they could get in whenever they wanted. I'll keep my distance, it said, as if reading my thoughts. But please, come see. Clutching my knife, I stepped outside for the first time in days. The air was cold, a reminder that summer was ending. The creature stayed 20 feet ahead of me, leading me along a path into the forest I'd never noticed before. We walked for nearly an hour, deeper into the wilderness than I'd gone before. Eventually, we came to a rock face covered in vines. The creature pushed the vines aside, revealing a narrow opening, a cave entrance. Inside, it said. I'm not going in there, I replied, then watched from here. It disappeared into the darkness. A moment later, lights flickered on inside, electric lights. I edged closer, peering in. What I saw made no sense at first. It looked like some kind of lab. Tables with equipment, charts on the walls, books and papers stacked neatly. We've been studying you as much as you've been studying us, the creature said, now fully visible in the light, trying to understand how you think, how you live. I took a cautious step inside, then another. The cave opened into a large chamber, and there, on the far wall, were photographs. Hundreds of them. People from the nearby town. Families. Children. Our replacements, it explained. We keep track of everyone. Next to each photo was information, names, habits, relationships, everything someone would need to perfectly mimic that person. How many? I whispered. The entire town now. Over 300 people. My legs felt weak. Why? Why do this? Survival, it said simply. Your kind has taken so much of our territory, hunted us. This was our solution. It led me deeper into the cave system. We passed rooms that looked like normal human living spaces, beds, furniture, even a kitchen. We practice here, it explained. Learn to live as you do. Then we came to another chamber, this one darker, warmer. There were soft sounds coming from the back. The creature turned on a small light. Children, at least a dozen of them, sleeping, on soft bedding, but they weren't normal children. Their features were slightly wrong, eyes a bit too large, fingers too long, small patches of fur on their arms and backs. Our future, the creature said, its voice softer now. Half human, half us. I couldn't speak. The horror of what I was seeing crashed over me in waves. The breeding program started 30 years ago. It continued. It was difficult at first, but we're getting better at it. These children ... I managed to say, will live among your kind, will look almost human, will help us expand our territory. I backed away, bumping into something behind me. I turned to see another creature, this one feminine in shape. It held something in its arms, a bundle wrapped in a blanket. Would you like to see the newest? It asked in a soft voice. Before I could answer, it pulled back the blanket. The baby looked almost human, almost, except for the golden eyes and the two teeth in its tiny mouth. Why show me this? I asked, my voice shaking. Because we have something else to show you, the first creature said. Something that concerns you directly. It led me to one final chamber. This one was smaller, more like a bedroom. On a table was a mirror. The creature gestured for me to look. See yourself, it said. I stepped forward and looked into the mirror. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then my reflection changed. My eyes turned golden. My teeth sharpened. My face subtly shifted, becoming something not quite human. What is this? I gasped. Touching my face, I felt normal. But the reflection, this is what you truly are, Alina, the creature said. Or rather, what you will become. Next to the mirror was a photograph. Me, as a child, with my parents. But in this photo, my parents' eyes had a faint golden glow to them. You were our first, the creature said. The first child born of both worlds, who looked fully human. Your parents were like us, but they raised you as human, to see if it could be done. I shook my head, backing away. No, that's not true. I grew up in California. I have memories, given to you, planted. Your real childhood was here. In these caves I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And now, it said, we've made your replacement. For when you're ready to join us fully, from the shadows, stepped ... me, perfect in every detail. My height, my face, my hair, even the small scar on my chin from a childhood fall. The only difference was the eyes, those golden, inhuman eyes. I ran. I don't remember how I found my way out of those caves, or how long I ran through the forest. My mind was breaking, shattering under the weight of what I'd seen. What they'd told me, it couldn't be true. I had memories of my childhood, my parents' house in California, the dog we had when I was 10, my first day of school, my graduation. But were those memories really mine, or were they planted, as the creature said? I made it back to the cabin and locked myself in, though I knew now that locks meant nothing to them. I paced the small rooms, trying to sort truth from lies. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked normal, human. I touched my face, my arms, no fur, no claws. I was still me, wasn't I? That night, they came for me, not sneaking through shadows this time. They walked openly to my door, 5 of them, standing upright. The one in front, the one who had shown me the cave, knocked politely. Alina, it called. It's time to make your choice. I knew what it meant. Join them willingly, or be replaced by my double. Either way, Alina Rodriguez, as the world knew her, would continue to exist, would return to Berkeley, would continue her research. But it wouldn't be me, or it would be a changed me. I didn't answer. I sat on my bed, the knife in my hand, though I knew it would do no good against them. We can wait, the voice said, but the longer you resist, the harder it will be. Dawn came. They were still outside, patient as only predators can be. Another day passed, and another. I was running out of food, out of water, out of time. On the fourth day, I finally spoke to them. If what you say is true, I called through the door. If I'm really one of you, why don't I remember? Why don't I feel it? Because you weren't ready, came the reply. We needed you to live as human, to learn as human, to think as human. So we suppressed your true nature. And now you've learned what we needed you to learn. Your research on Wolfpack dynamics, it will help us understand ourselves better. I thought about my work. All those observations about how wolves communicate, how they organize themselves, their social structures, in the wrong hands or paws. That knowledge could make these creatures even more dangerous. What happens if I join you? I asked. You accept what you truly are. You take your place in the pack. Your memories, your real memories will return. And if I refuse, then your replacement takes your place in the human world. And you stay here, with us, until you accept the truth. Neither option was really a choice. That night, I made my decision. Not out of courage, but out of a bone-deep exhaustion. I couldn't fight anymore. I couldn't run. I opened the door. They were waiting, 5 of them, in a half-circle. Their golden eyes gleamed in the moonlight. The leader stepped forward. You've chosen wisely, it said. I want to know one thing first, I said. The real Elena Rodriguez, the human child. What happened to her? The creature tilted its head. There never was a human Elena Rodriguez. You were born of our kind, raised among humans, yes, but always one of us. I didn't know whether to believe it, but did it matter anymore? They led me back to the caves, deep inside, past the lab, past the children's chamber, to a room I hadn't seen before. A circular space with strange markings carved into the stone floor. Candles burned around the edges, casting dancing shadows. The acceptance ritual, the leader explained. To awaken your true self, the others formed a circle around me. One held out a small, sharp knife, not metal, but what looked like bone. Your blood must be given willingly, the leader said. I took the knife. My hand trembled. Where? I asked. 3 marks. Forehead, heart, hand. I pressed the tip of the knife to my forehead, drew a small line. Blood trickled down between my eyes. I did the same over my heart, then across my palm. The others began to move around me, a slow circle that gradually picked up speed. They made sounds, not quite howls, not quite words, something in between. The leader placed its hands on my shoulders. Its touch was warm, too warm, like fever. Remember, it whispered in my ear. And suddenly, I did. Memories flooded my mind. Not the false human memories of California. Real memories. Being born in these caves, running on all 4s through the forest as a child, learning to hunt, learning to shift my form, learning to speak as humans speak, and other memories that weren't mine. Memories of the pack. Centuries of watching humans, learning from them, taking their forms, their towns, their lives. I remembered the first human child I'd helped replace decades ago. The fear in her eyes, the satisfaction I'd felt as my kind took another piece of territory from the hairless apes who had pushed us to the brink. These weren't just memories. They were feelings, instincts, loyalty to the pack above all else. The joy of the hunt. The perfect unity of the collective mind. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed. My body burned. My bones shifted beneath my skin. My teeth ached as they sharpened. Don't fight it, the leader said. Accept what you are. The pain was unbearable. Then, suddenly, it wasn't pain at all. It was release, freedom. I opened my eyes. The world looked different, sharper, full of scents and sounds I'd never noticed before. I could feel the others around me, not just their physical presence, but their thoughts, their emotions, their memories, now part of my own. I stood up. My body felt stronger, more balanced, more right than it ever had before. Welcome home, Elena, the leader said. But I knew its name now, Van. I knew all their names, just as they knew me, my true self. The days that followed were a blur of new experiences, or rather, old experiences rediscovered. I relearned how to shift my form, how to move through shadows, how to use the paralyzing gaze that had once frozen me in terror. I learned about our history, how we had once ruled these mountains before humans came, how we had adapted, learned to mimic them, infiltrate them, how we planned to reclaim our territory, one town at a time. I met the others like me, children raised as human, now returned to the pack. each bringing valuable knowledge from the human world, medicine, technology, government, and I understood my purpose. My research on wolf pack dynamics wasn't just academic, it was crucial to our survival. Our pack had grown too large, too complex. We needed new ways to organize, to communicate, to maintain our collective consciousness across greater distances. A month after my awakening, I stood before Van and the elders. "It's time for you to return," Van said. I knew what he meant. Return to Barclay, to my human life. "But now, as a willing agent of the pack, your replacement has been waiting," he continued. "She will stay here, join the breeding program. You will take her place." My replacement, the perfect copy of my human self, stepped forward. We looked at each other, identical except for what lay beneath the skin. "Your work at the university will be important," Van said. "You'll identify other researchers for us to bring here, other knowledge we need." I nodded. I felt no conflict, no moral qualms. The human part of me, or what I had thought was human, was gone. There was only the pack now. 2 days later, I packed my research and prepared to leave. The helicopter would arrive tomorrow, piloted by one of our kind, disguised as Pete Manning. The real Pete's body had been disposed of, just as Doug's had been, just as Tom's had been. That night, I walked into the forest alone. The moon was full, casting silver light through the trees. I removed my human clothes and shifted fully for the first time, bones cracking, skin stretching, fur emerging. It hurt, but it was a good pain, a natural pain. I ran with the pack that night, faster than human feet could carry me. We brought down a deer together, shared in the kill. I felt their joy, their acceptance, my joy, my pack. When dawn came, I shifted back, put on my human skin again, both literally and figuratively, dressed in clean clothes, packed my notes, my real notes now, containing coded information for our kind in other cities. The helicopter arrived on schedule. I climbed aboard with a smile, waved goodbye to the research station. "Good trip, Dr. Rodriguez," the pilot asked in Pete's voice. "Very productive," I replied. "I can't wait to share my findings." As we lifted off, I looked down at the valley below. To human eyes, it would appear empty, wild, untouched. But I knew better now. I could see the pack moving through the trees. My pack, my family, my true self. I thought about the humans waiting for me back at Berkeley, my colleagues, my students. None of them would notice any difference in me. I would smile the same smile, write the same way, teach the same classes, but I would be watching them, evaluating them, selecting the promising ones to invite for special research projects in remote locations, and one by one, our territory would grow. The helicopter banked toward civilization. I smiled, feeling the slight ache of my sharpened teeth against my gums, feeling the golden glow behind my eyes that I now knew how to hide. Elena Rodriguez, PhD, respected wildlife biologist, expert on wolf behavior, and something else entirely.